The sun rose slowly over Bikini Bottom, filtering pale light through the water and casting soft patterns across the sandy floor. In her tree dome, Sandy cheeks moved with deliberate precision, beginning the day's work in her carefully organized laboratory. Shelves lined with glass beakers, metal instruments, and jars of powders and liquids glinted faintly in the morning light, each object positioned exactly where it needed to be. The soft hum of machinery filled the room, subtle and steady, blending with the distant, muffled sounds of the underwater world outside. Sandy adjusted the temperature of the room, making sure it was optimal for the delicate experiments planned for the day. The thermostat clicked quietly, signaling the small shifts in climate that would ensure the substances remained stable. She checked each station meticulously, scanning each tray, shelf, and container with a practiced eye. The lab was dense with potential, each piece of equipment and every chemical a small living component of the day's process. SpongeBob arrived shortly after, his movement energetic but careful, guided by years of familiarity with Sandy's routines. He stepped lightly across the floor, careful not to disturb the arrangement of instruments or accidentally tip over a tray of liquids. The soft squeak of his shoes against the polished surface punctuated the otherwise quiet room. He carried a notebook in which he had drawn diagrams from previous visits, ready to follow Sandy's instructions and assist in the precise measurements that would guide the day's work. Patrick followed behind, slower and less coordinated, yet equally enthusiastic. His steps were slightly heavier, producing gentle thuds as he navigated around tables and counters. He glanced at the glass containers, fascinated by the swirling liquids and powders lined up in neat rows. Though less skilled and careful than SpongeBob, Patrick's presence added an element of gentle unpredictability to the lab, a reminder of the slow, organic chaos that accompanied careful experimentation. Sandy began the morning by preparing the first set of instruments, arranging beakers in sequence according to size and purpose. She handled each object with deliberate care, setting them down with soft thuds that echoed lightly across the polished floor. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, retrieving glass rods, funnels, and measuring cylinders from carefully labeled compartments. Patrick watched closely, mimicking their motions and slow, exaggerated gestures, producing soft splashes and light clinks that became part of the gentle auditory landscape of the room. The first liquids were poured, each measured in precise quantities. Sandy moved systematically, slowly tilting each container and watching the fluid settle. SpongeBob assisted, steadying cylinders and ensuring that each drop landed in its intended vessel. The soft hiss of liquid meeting liquid, the gentle clink of glass against glass, and the occasional plop of a small bubble rising to the surface created a rhythmic background, a steady pulse that guided their actions. Patrick added his own careful contributions, tilting a container slightly more slowly, creating small ripples in the liquids that added texture to the soundscape without disrupting the precision of the work. Sandy checked her notes and diagrams, confirming each measurement and ensuring that every detail aligned with the planned sequence. SpongeBob watched intently, ready to replicate the movements and maintain the rhythm of preparation. Patrick's curiosity drew his attention from one beaker to another, observing the subtle changes in color and viscosity as liquids were combined. Each color shift, each tiny reaction, produced a delicate visual effect, slowly transforming the lab into a living mosaic of movement, light, and liquid. The morning progressed as the first stage of the experiment took form. Sandy adjusted the temperature of a small heating element, watching carefully as the liquid inside a beaker began to bubble gently. The hiss of steam mingled with the faint hum of machinery and the soft clatter of instruments being moved or arranged. SpongeBob assisted by stirring carefully with a glass rod, maintaining a constant, steady motion to ensure the mixture remained homogeneous. Patrick, fascinated, leaned close to the beaker, observing the bubbles rising and the slow, subtle changes of color and density. His movements were slower, almost contemplative, integrating into the overall rhythm of the room without disruption. Every motion in the lab contributed to a sense of continuous, deliberate flow. Sandy checked each step against her diagrams, confirming that all actions aligned with the expected outcomes. SpongeBob and Patrick, though different in their approach and skill, synchronized naturally with her pace. The sounds of preparation, measured and rhythmic, created a dense auditory layer that supported the visual and tactile flow of the experiment. Each splash, hiss, and clink became part of the ongoing momentum, a gentle yet constant current guiding the day's work. Sandy moved to the next stage, selecting powdered reagents from carefully labeled jars. She lifted each container, shaking a precise amount into small bowls, watching how the powders settled and combined. SpongeBob assisted by holding bowls steady, brushing away stray particles with careful, methodical movements. Patrick mimicked the motions with exaggerated slowness, spilling only small amounts, which Sandy corrected with calm precision. The soft sifting of powders, the faint scraping of metal instruments, and the subtle movement of air over the mixtures created a textured, immersive, auditory environment. As liquids and powders combined, subtle chemical reactions began to occur. Tiny bubbles formed, slowly rising to the surface, and slight color changes appeared in response to the measured mixtures. SpongeBob observed carefully, ensuring that the motions were consistent and that no part of the mixture became disturbed. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the visual shifts, his breathing slow and deliberate as he watched the delicate changes unfold. Sandy monitored both the reactions and the movements of her assistants, ensuring continuity and maintaining a calm, controlled environment. The lab was dense with activity, yet everything moved in a deliberate, measured flow. Each step built upon the last, creating a continuous chain of preparation and observation. SpongeBob adjusted the position of a stirring rod. Patrick leaned slightly forward to examine the rise of a tiny bubble, and Sandy moved along her stations, monitoring temperatures, volumes, and reactions. The room was filled with layered sounds, soft hisses, gentle clinks, liquid swirling, and the faint hum of machines, all merging into a continuous immersive background. Time passed slowly but steadily. The morning's work created a rhythm, a persistent flow of precise actions, observation, and gentle adjustment. SpongeBob maintained his focus, replicating Sandy's motions perfectly, while Patrick's slower, exploratory movements added texture to the continuity. Sandy's careful oversight ensured that each step adhered to the plan, yet allowed room for the subtle organic variations brought by her assistants. The room operated as a living system, dense with sound, motion, and concentration. As the first phase of the experiment approached completion, Sandy began preparing for the next stage. She carefully organized all completed mixtures, placing them on a separate tray for observation. SpongeBob assisted in transferring the delicate vessels, moving slowly and deliberately to avoid disruption. Patrick, watching intently, mimicked their motions with exaggerated care, adding a gentle rhythm to the flow. The soft clinks and hisses of moving glass, combined with bubbling liquids and the faint hum of the lab, created a continuous soundscape that filled the tree dome. By late morning, the lab had transformed into a dynamic yet controlled environment. Every action, from the smallest bubble rising in a beaker to the careful placement of instruments, contributed to the overall flow. Sandy's deliberate, precise movements guided SpongeBob and Patrick, while their combined efforts reinforced the continuity of the work. The atmosphere was dense, immersive, and rhythmic, a living system of sound, motion, and observation, all orchestrated toward the unfolding experiments. Even as the first stage drew to a close, the flow of activity remained continuous. Sandy made final adjustments to temperatures and measurements. SpongeBob prepared the next set of tools, and Patrick observed with patient fascination. The lab was filled with subtle, layered sounds, the soft hum of machinery, bubbling liquids, and gentle clinks of instruments moving in rhythm. Each element reinforced the steady, immersive pulse that defined the morning, sustaining a calm, concentrated, and meticulously controlled environment. The morning in Sandy's lab had established the foundation for the day's experiments. The synchronized actions of Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick created a dense, immersive rhythm, balancing precision with gentle observation and curiosity. The environment was alive with controlled motion, subtle sound, and careful attention, a perfect setting for the long, deliberate experiments to follow. Every step, every movement, every soft noise contributed to the flow, creating a sense of continuity, calm, and immersive focus. The laboratory of Sandy Cheeks continued to hum with quiet energy as the morning progressed. Sunlight filtered through the tree dome, soft and diffused, casting faint rippling patterns on the surfaces of tables and counters. Each object, beaker, jar, funnel, and metal tool stood ready, meticulously arranged for the next stage of experimentation. Sandy moved deliberately, her movements fluid and measured, as if she were part of the rhythm of the lab itself. Every step produced a soft echo in the polished floor, each hand movement generating a gentle, metallic clink, a subtle sound that blended seamlessly into the surrounding hum of machinery. SpongeBob followed her closely, moving carefully between tables, ensuring that all instruments were accounted for and placed in proper order. His small hands touched each beaker lightly, testing balance and stability before setting it down. He handled powders and liquids with delicate care, pouring just enough to prepare for future combinations. Each motion was precise, synchronized with Sandy's rhythm, contributing to the dense flow of activity in the room. Patrick, on the other hand, moved more slowly, observing everything with wide, fascinated eyes. He mirrored Sandy's motions in his own way, tilting a beaker too slowly or shifting a funnel slightly out of alignment, creating soft splashes or tiny clinks that added texture to the ambient sound. Sandy adjusted his movements with subtle guidance, repositioning containers or steadying instruments, maintaining control while allowing his curiosity to remain part of the room's energy. His slower pace contrasted with SpongeBob's precise motions, yet both integrated seamlessly into the overall flow. The organization of ingredients was meticulous. Sandy retrieved small jars of powders, carefully reading labels before placing each on the counter. SpongeBob assisted by arranging the jars in neat rows, aligning each according to size and content, ensuring easy access for future stages of the experiment. Patrick leaned close, fascinated by the colors, textures, and shimmer of each substance. He gently tapped the glass, producing soft, resonant sounds that became part of the delicate auditory environment. Sandy measured each powder with painstaking precision. Tiny scoops of bright substances were poured into bowls and dishes, forming perfect portions. SpongeBob held bowls steady, adjusting his movements to accommodate the soft shifts caused by the slightest misalignment. Patrick, still slower and more exploratory, occasionally spilled a small amount which Sandy corrected without frustration, her movements deliberate and calm. The soft scratching of spoons against bowls, the faint sifting of powders, and the gentle clinking of glass created a layered, continuous soundscape. Liquid ingredients followed a similar pattern. Sandy poured each liquid slowly into small graduated cylinders, monitoring volume carefully. SpongeBob assisted by stabilizing the containers and adjusting the flow to prevent overflow. Patrick observed, tilting a container more gradually, adding tiny ripples and soft hisses as droplets fell into the mixture. Sandy's hands moved smoothly, guiding each motion and maintaining a precise rhythm. The soft hiss of liquid meeting liquid, the gentle clink of glass instruments, and the faint hum of the lab machinery blended into a calm, dense auditory texture. Every step was deliberate. Sandy double-checked each measurement against her diagrams, ensuring accuracy while maintaining flow. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, following every motion and maintaining the rhythm of preparation. Patrick contributed subtle variations, his movements slower and more tentative, adding complexity to the continuity of the room. The lab functioned as a living system, dense with sound, movement, and observation, where every detail reinforced the ongoing process of experimentation. The arrangement of ingredients continued for hours. Powders were aligned in rows, liquids grouped by viscosity and color, and instruments placed exactly where they would be needed for the next stages. Sandy moved systematically, adjusting positions, testing stability, and ensuring each element contributed to the workflow. SpongeBob assisted tirelessly, his hands moving in harmony with hers, while Patrick continued to add soft, unpredictable rhythms to the environment. The result was a dense, immersive atmosphere, a combination of deliberate precision and gentle, organic variation. Sandy then began to combine small portions of ingredients in test bowls, creating initial reactions for observation. She stirred slowly, producing soft swirls and gentle splashes. SpongeBob assisted with careful motions, stabilizing bowls and ensuring each stir was consistent. Patrick leaned close, fascinated by the formation of tiny bubbles and the subtle changes in color and texture. His slow, exaggerated movements caused minor ripples that shifted the light across the surface of the mixtures, adding a visual layer to the sensory experience. The lab's energy was dense but controlled. Each motion, from the soft pour of a powder to the gentle tilt of a liquid container, produced layered auditory textures, clinks, hisses, splashes, and the steady hum of machinery. SpongeBob maintained a precise rhythm, following Sandy's guidance, while Patrick's slower, curious movements added texture and variation. Sandy monitored both, balancing efficiency and curiosity to sustain the flow of activity. Temperature and timing became the next focus. Sandy adjusted small heating elements beneath certain bowls, observing subtle changes in reactions. SpongeBob held instruments in place, ensuring even heat distribution, while Patrick leaned close, fascinated by the slow rising of bubbles and shifts in color. The hiss of warmth meeting liquid combined with the ambient sounds of the room, producing a dense yet gentle background, perfectly suited for a calm, immersive experience. Observation was continuous. Sandy monitored color changes, viscosity, and the formation of small bubbles, noting every detail in her diagrams. SpongeBob recorded measurements, maintaining precise alignment with each step, while Patrick observed in wonder, occasionally producing soft splashes or clinks that became part of the layered rhythm. The lab operated as a coordinated system, dense with sound, movement, and attention to detail, each action built upon the previous, maintaining continuity and reinforcing the immersive environment. The process of organizing ingredients extended into subtle adjustments. Sandy repositioned containers, added small amounts of liquid to powders, and adjusted heat sources. SpongeBob mirrored each motion with careful precision, maintaining the rhythm of preparation. Patrick contributed slow, exploratory gestures, tapping instruments or watching bubbles rise, producing delicate sounds that blended naturally into the existing texture. Each element, human, robotic, or accidental, contributed to the continuous dense atmosphere of the lab. By mid-morning, the lab was fully prepared. Every ingredient was measured, arranged, and partially combined. Trays were ready, instruments aligned, and the first reactions stabilized. SpongeBob and Patrick continued to assist, their movements synchronized with Sandy's, maintaining the flow of activity. The room was dense with layered sounds, liquid swirling, powders sifting, glass instruments clinking softly, and machinery humming steadily. The environment had become a living ecosystem of careful motion and gentle observation, each component essential to the next phase of experimentation. Sandy paused to review her notes and diagrams, ensuring that every measurement, combination, and adjustment aligned perfectly with the intended sequence. SpongeBob mirrored her review, scanning instruments and mixtures for precision, while Patrick observed with quiet fascination, occasionally tilting a container to watch subtle shifts. The combination of deliberate action and gentle curiosity sustained the flow of the lab, reinforcing both the rhythm and the immersive quality of the environment. Small reactions began to stabilize as the carefully organized ingredients interacted. Tiny bubbles rose slowly, colors shifted imperceptibly, and gentle hisses accompanied subtle chemical changes. SpongeBob assisted in maintaining consistency, stirring or stabilizing containers as needed. Patrick leaned closer, captivated by the visual details, moving slowly and contributing soft sounds to the layered ambiance. Sandy's movements remained precise and measured, balancing observation with gentle intervention to maintain a continuous flow of action. The room was dense with activity, yet entirely controlled. Each movement, sound, and observation contributed to a continuous rhythm, a layered texture of sensory input. SpongeBob followed every instruction with meticulous precision, while Patrick's slow, curious gestures produced subtle variations. Sandy orchestrated the environment, ensuring that every element aligned with the intended flow, creating a calm, immersive experience that combined sound, motion, and observation. As the morning transitioned toward the next stage, Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick continued to work in harmony. Trays of measured ingredients were ready, small reactions stabilized, and instruments aligned for the next phase. The lab's atmosphere remained dense and continuous, filled with subtle sounds and rhythmic motions. Each detail, from the soft swirl of a liquid to the gentle clink of glass instruments, contributed to the immersive, relaxing environment that defined the morning in Sandy's laboratory. The laboratory had settled into a steady rhythm as the morning progressed into late hours. Every surface reflected the soft glow of sunlight filtered through Sandy's tree dome, casting gentle patterns over trays, beakers, and glass instruments. The air carried a subtle warmth, enhanced by the heating elements beneath certain mixtures, and it shimmered slightly with steam rising from carefully controlled liquids. Sandy moved with deliberate precision, her movements fluid and exact, integrating naturally into the dense pulse of activity that had defined the morning. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, his small hands steady as he prepared for the first major stage, the careful mixing of the pre-measured liquids and powders. Each beaker had been arranged meticulously, each powder portion placed exactly where it was needed. SpongeBob aligned the bowls, adjusted containers, and prepared stirring rods, ensuring that every motion reinforced the structured flow of the laboratory. Patrick, slower and less precise, observed with quiet fascination. His large eyes followed the subtle movements of liquids, the rising of tiny bubbles, and the shift of color in each mixture. Though less coordinated, his presence added a gentle unpredictability that enriched the dense rhythm of the environment. Sandy began the first combination, pouring a measured liquid into a bowl of powder with careful attention. The soft hiss of liquid meeting powder, the gentle swirling of the mixture, and the faint clinking of glass against glass produced a layered auditory texture. SpongeBob stirred with deliberate rhythm, ensuring each particle integrated evenly. Patrick leaned closer, tilting a small beaker in an attempt to replicate the motion, causing slight ripples and soft splashes that became part of the room's immersive soundscape. Sandy's hands moved with unbroken focus, monitoring each reaction, adjusting pace and direction to maintain perfect control. The first mixture responded with subtle reactions. Tiny bubbles rose slowly to the surface, faint wisps of steam curled upward, and a gentle change of color began. SpongeBob continued to stir, following Sandy's precise tempo, ensuring continuity. Patrick, fascinated by the visual transformation, shifted slightly, tapping the side of a container and creating soft, metallic clinks. Sandy adjusted his movements with a calm hand, reinforcing the rhythm while allowing his curiosity to contribute to the layered texture of the ambient sounds. With the first mixture stabilized, Sandy prepared the next combination. She carefully retrieved a new set of liquids and powders, aligning them according to sequence and viscosity. SpongeBob assisted, holding bowls and guiding containers into perfect position. Patrick observed closely, moving slowly and deliberately, adding subtle variations to the rhythm of the lab. Each new combination created faint hisses, soft clinks, and gentle swirls, layering into the continuous pulse of activity. The soundscape was dense yet calm, a living auditory texture of motion, observation, and chemical reaction. Sandy's attention remained focused on precision. She measured minute amounts of liquid into powder, observing how the particles integrated, the rising of tiny bubbles, and the emergence of subtle textures. SpongeBob's hands mirrored her movements, stirring and stabilizing mixtures with perfect alignment. Patrick, though slower and less coordinated, leaned close, fascinated by the way colors deepened or shifted in the bowl. His small, tentative movements produced soft splashes, clinks, and whispers of sound that added dimension to the ambient environment without disturbing the ongoing process. The third mixture required careful heating. Sandy adjusted a small burner beneath the beaker, monitoring the temperature meticulously. SpongeBob held the container steady, tilting gently to ensure even distribution of heat. Patrick leaned closer, eyes wide, observing the formation of tiny bubbles and wisps of steam. The gentle hiss of warmth meeting liquid, combined with the soft clinking of stirring rods and faint metallic echoes from nearby instruments, created a dense auditory backdrop. The lab's energy remained controlled yet immersive, a continuous flow of motion, sound, and observation. Sandy rotated the beaker slowly, guiding SpongeBob and maintaining the rhythm of the stir. Each rotation was precise, creating subtle circular currents within the mixture. Patrick mimicked the motions in his own slower way, tilting a small rod or nudging a bubble with gentle curiosity. The layered movement produced a soft, flowing sound, swirls of liquid, faint splashes, and the occasional metallic tap. Sandy observed each detail carefully, adjusting temperature and motion as necessary, sustaining the continuity of the experiment. As mixtures progressed, subtle changes became more pronounced. Colors shifted gently, bubbles grew slowly larger before dissipating, and faint aromatic notes rose into the air. SpongeBob adjusted stirring speed and motion, ensuring homogeneity, while Patrick leaned in, producing soft variations in the rhythm with his slower, exploratory gestures. Sandy maintained oversight, balancing precision and patience to preserve the unbroken flow of the lab's activity. The lab remained dense with activity. Sandy moved methodically from station to station, overseeing each combination, adjusting timing, and monitoring reactions. SpongeBob mirrored her movements with exacting precision, stabilizing containers, stirring mixtures, and recording minor observations. Patrick's slower, deliberate actions created gentle variations in sound, tiny clinks, subtle splashes, and soft taps against glass instruments. The resulting environment was a layered, immersive, and continuous texture of motion and auditory detail, perfect for a relaxing experience. Every combination required careful observation. Sandy noted changes in color, viscosity, and reaction speed, marking diagrams with precise movements. SpongeBob assisted, maintaining consistent motion and rhythm. Patrick added subtle textures through soft sounds and small, tentative motions. The lab operated as a living system, each participant contributing uniquely to the ongoing flow. The dense layering of action, sound, and observation created a rhythm that remained continuous and immersive, blending precision and gentle unpredictability. Temperature adjustments continued as the mixtures stabilized. Sandy monitored each container carefully, adjusting burners and heaters in small increments. SpongeBob held vessels steady, rotating slowly to ensure even heat distribution. Patrick leaned close, observing faint color changes and the slow rising of bubbles, producing soft clinks and gentle splashes with every subtle movement. The combination of these actions reinforced the continuous flow of the experiment, maintaining dense and calm energy throughout the lab. Sandy next began combining two stabilized mixtures. The process required extreme precision. She poured one solution into the other with careful, measured movement. SpongeBob mirrored her motions, stirring and stabilizing the mixture to ensure uniform blending. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the way bubbles formed and colors merged, moving slowly and producing delicate sounds that layered naturally into the ambient rhythm. The mixture responded with gentle hisses and tiny bubbles, forming a continuous visual and auditory pulse. The lab's rhythm remained unbroken. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick moved with careful coordination, each action contributing to the dense, immersive environment. Tiny bubbles rose and popped, liquids swirled gently, and soft clinks echoed as instruments were adjusted. The steady hum of machines combined with these organic sounds to form a continuous texture, a living representation of slow, deliberate experimentation. Sandy rotated through each station, adjusting timing, monitoring reactions, and noting subtle changes. SpongeBob mirrored her movements with perfect precision, while Patrick's slower, exploratory motions added variation to the soundscape. Every stir, tilt, and adjustment contributed to the dense, continuous rhythm of the lab. The environment was fully immersive, rich in both visual and auditory detail, and dense with the combined focus of the three participants. The morning progressed, each mixture further stabilized. Sandy continued to guide the process, adjusting heat, motion, and timing with careful attention. SpongeBob maintained rhythm, stirring consistently and stabilizing vessels. Patrick observed every reaction closely, producing soft splashes and gentle taps that layered naturally into the overall soundscape. The lab remained a continuous ecosystem of motion and sound, dense yet controlled, immersive and calming. As the first major phase of mixing solutions neared completion, subtle reactions became more complex. Tiny bubbles merged into larger formations. Color shifts deepened, and faint aromas began to fill the air. SpongeBob adjusted motions to maintain homogeneity, stirring steadily and carefully. Patrick leaned in, his slower movements producing gentle variations, nudging small bubbles or tilting instruments with curiosity. Sandy maintained overall control, orchestrating the combined efforts to preserve continuity and balance. By the end of the chapter, the lab had transformed into a dense, immersive environment, filled with the combined motions and sounds of Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick. Each action, each soft clink, hiss, and bubble contributed to a continuous layered rhythm, maintaining flow and cohesion. The mixtures had stabilized sufficiently for observation, yet the day's work was far from complete. The room pulsed with dense activity, anticipation, and quiet curiosity, fully alive as a controlled ecosystem of motion, sound, and attention. The lab had settled into a gentle, continuous rhythm, its dense atmosphere alive with the controlled movements of Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick. Each surface reflected soft, dappled sunlight filtering through the tree dome, casting subtle ripples across trays, beakers, and instruments. The air carried warmth from the small burners beneath select mixtures, and faint wisps of steam rose from the stabilized solutions. Every movement, every sound, contributed to a continuous pulse that defined the morning and set the stage for the first small reactions of the day. Sandy moved deliberately, selecting carefully measured mixtures from the organized trays. Her hands guided each container with precise motions, tilting slowly to pour one solution into another. The liquids met with soft hisses and gentle bubbling, producing subtle swirls and tiny ripples. SpongeBob mirrored her movements exactly, his hands steady as he stabilized each vessel and stirred gently to maintain uniformity. Patrick observed closely, leaning forward and producing small splashes and clinks with his tentative movements. The room was filled with layered, immersive sounds, bubbles rising, glass clinking softly, and the faint hum of machinery. Each small reaction unfolded slowly. Tiny bubbles formed at the surface, drifting upward with delicate motion, while faint color changes appeared as ingredients merged. Sandy's attention remained unbroken, monitoring the interactions with precise care. SpongeBob maintained a steady stirring rhythm, ensuring the mixtures stayed homogeneous. Patrick, moving more slowly, nudged a tiny bubble with a stirring rod or tapped the side of a beaker gently, producing subtle variations in the ongoing soundscape. Every movement, deliberate or exploratory, contributed to the dense auditory and visual texture of the laboratory. The first set of reactions required careful temperature adjustments. Sandy rotated small burners, observing how each mixture responded to gentle heat. SpongeBob held vessels steady, tilting subtly to encourage even warming. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the slow rise of bubbles and the subtle changes in viscosity. The hiss of warmth meeting liquid, combined with soft clinks and swirling sounds, created a continuous layered atmosphere, immersing the lab in a steady, calming rhythm. As reactions stabilized, Sandy began the next sequence, combining mixtures in a new order. Liquids were poured slowly, powders added gradually, and every motion executed with exacting precision. SpongeBob mirrored her carefully, stirring and adjusting with rhythm and continuity. Patrick followed at a slower pace, producing soft, unpredictable sounds that enriched the environment without disturbing the controlled flow. The mixtures responded with gentle bubbling, faint color shifts, and subtle steam rising, layering visual and auditory cues that created a dense, immersive experience. The lab's energy remained constant, dense yet calm. Sandy moved systematically between stations, checking temperatures, adjusting stir rates, and observing each reaction's progression. SpongeBob maintained his rhythm perfectly, stabilizing vessels, stirring consistently, and recording minor observations. Patrick's slower, exploratory movements added texture to the overall pulse. Faint taps, soft splashes, and gentle nudges contributed to the layered soundscape. Every element, motion, and noise became part of the continuous immersive rhythm that defined the laboratory. Sandy began a more delicate combination, merging a slightly reactive mixture with a stabilized solution. The liquids met with subtle hisses, gentle bubbling, and slow color changes. SpongeBob stirred slowly, ensuring uniform integration, while Patrick observed with wide-eyed fascination, tilting a container gently or nudging a small bubble with a rod. The result was a dense, immersive auditory environment. Tiny bubbles popping softly, liquids swirling, faint hisses, and a subtle metallic clink of instruments adjusting in place. Each sound layered naturally into the ongoing rhythm of the lab. Observation remained critical. Sandy monitored reactions closely, noting changes in bubble size, color, and viscosity. SpongeBob mirrored her motions with exacting care, maintaining the continuity of stirring and stabilization. Patrick contributed subtle variations in sound and motion, tilting containers or tapping gently, enhancing the auditory richness of the room. The lab functioned as a living system, each element synchronized into a continuous immersive flow of action, observation, and gentle sound. Small reactions progressed steadily. Tiny bubbles merged and rose slowly to the surface, while faint color gradients shifted across each mixture. SpongeBob adjusted stirring speed to maintain even consistency. Patrick leaned in closer, moving slowly and producing soft splashes that layered into the ongoing rhythm. Sandy orchestrated the process with meticulous attention, balancing precision and patience, ensuring continuity, and maintaining the dense, immersive atmosphere of the laboratory. The air in the lab was dense with subtle scents, faint chemical aromas, warm steam, and hints of powdery residues from measured ingredients. Each inhalation seemed to carry the rhythm of the environment, blending sensory experience with movement and sound. SpongeBob maintained focus, stirring steadily and observing subtle changes, while Patrick's slower, tentative actions produced gentle, unexpected nuances in the audio and visual texture. Sandy guided every motion, ensuring balance, rhythm, and a seamless continuation of the day's experiments. As the small reactions continued, Sandy introduced mild temperature fluctuations to encourage gradual chemical responses. SpongeBob adjusted motions to stabilize the mixtures as slight steam and soft hisses arose. Patrick leaned forward, fascinated by tiny color shifts and the formation of small bubbles, tapping, lightly against glass surfaces and producing soft, resonant sounds. Each reaction, each subtle adjustment, reinforced the continuous layered rhythm of the laboratory. Sandy rotated through each station with careful precision. She monitored the stability of mixtures, observed the rise and pop of bubbles, and adjusted heat and stirring accordingly. SpongeBob mirrored her exacting motions, maintaining a steady rhythm and stabilizing each vessel. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures continued to add texture to the environment. Gentle clinks, faint splashes, and soft taps layered seamlessly into the immersive flow. The lab was alive with motion, sound, and observation, dense with rhythm yet calm in its consistency. The next set of reactions involved slightly more active compounds. Sandy combined them with precision, producing slow, controlled bubbling and gentle color gradients. SpongeBob stirred in synchronization, maintaining homogeneity and careful observation. Patrick leaned in, tilting a container to watch bubbles merge or tapping gently to observe their rise. The sounds of gentle hissing, soft splashing, swirling liquids, and metallic clinks blended into a dense, continuous auditory environment. Each movement, reaction, and sound reinforced the rhythm, contributing to the immersive, calming atmosphere of the lab. Sandy monitored every detail, noting subtle changes and guiding SpongeBob's precise actions. Patrick's curiosity continued to produce soft, layered sounds that enhanced the auditory texture without disrupting continuity. The mixtures bubbled gently, colors shifted slowly, and faint aromas mingled in the air. The combined motions of the three participants created a dense, immersive experience, blending precision with gentle unpredictability in a calm, continuous rhythm. By midday, the small reactions had reached a stable phase. Tiny bubbles floated slowly to the surface. Faint colors glimmered across the mixtures, and soft hisses and clinks layered into the ambient soundscape. SpongeBob maintained his rhythm, stirring gently and ensuring uniformity, while Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures contributed subtle textures. Sandy's precise oversight ensured balance, continuity, and a dense, immersive flow of activity that carried the morning into the next stage of the day. The lab had become a living ecosystem of motion, observation, and sound. Each bubble, each stir, each soft tap of glass or metal contributed to the continuous rhythm. SpongeBob's precise motions maintained consistency. Patrick's slow gestures added variation, and Sandy's careful guidance orchestrated the entire environment. The small reactions, delicate yet engaging, became the central focus, dense with sensory detail and gentle motion, sustaining a calm, immersive atmosphere. Even as the reaction stabilized, Sandy continued to monitor and adjust subtly, ensuring every mixture retained balance and continuity. SpongeBob mirrored each adjustment, stirring gently and stabilizing containers, while Patrick leaned closer, producing soft exploratory sounds with each small movement. The lab remained dense, immersive, and continuous, a living, breathing environment of precise experimentation, careful observation, and gentle auditory textures. By late afternoon, the small reactions had produced a visual and auditory rhythm, dense and immersive, suitable for extended observation. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick moved with fluidity, their combined motions creating layers of sound and motion that defined the lab's atmosphere. Each hissing bubble, subtle clink, and gentle swirl contributed to the continuous pulse, sustaining a sense of calm, focus, and gentle curiosity. The first small reactions had achieved their intended purpose. They provided a base for more complex experiments while maintaining a calm, immersive environment. The lab pulsed with dense, layered activity, combining precision and gentle variation into a seamless, continuous flow. Sandy observed each reaction with careful eyes. SpongeBob maintained consistent motion, and Patrick added subtle textures, creating an auditory and visual landscape rich in detail and perfect for a relaxing, immersive experience. The laboratory hummed with a quiet, persistent energy as the afternoon settled over Sandy Cheek's tree dome. Sunlight slanted through the glass, casting soft ripples across trays, beakers, and instruments. The air carried gentle warmth from the burners and heating elements beneath select mixtures. The faint hiss of steam rising from stabilized solutions mingled with the soft clinking of glass and metal tools, producing a dense, layered soundscape. Sandy moved with deliberate precision, her motions fluid and purposeful, guiding the next stage of the experiment, adjusting temperatures to ensure optimal reaction conditions. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, small hands steady and exact as he held containers and adjusted stirring rods. Every motion was deliberate, timed to maintain the continuous flow of the laboratory's rhythm. Patrick observed closely, moving slower, tilting vessels or nudging bubbles, producing soft splashes and clinks that added gentle texture to the room's auditory environment. The trio moved together, forming a coordinated system of action, observation, and subtle sound. Sandy began by monitoring the first set of mixtures. She rotated small burners beneath the containers, adjusting flame intensity gradually. The soft hiss of heating liquids combined with bubbling and faint metallic clinks from instruments created a layered, ambient rhythm. SpongeBob held each beaker steady, tilting slightly as instructed to distribute heat evenly. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the slow rise of bubbles and the subtle color transformations that occurred in response to the heat adjustments. The first adjustment required careful timing. Sandy watched the reactions closely, noting the precise moment when viscosity increased or color shifted. SpongeBob stirred slowly and methodically, maintaining homogeneity. Patrick moved even more slowly, tilting the container and tapping lightly, creating small auditory variations that blended into the immersive texture. Every hissing bubble, faint clink, and swirling motion became part of the dense rhythm of the lab, contributing to a continuous, calming environment. Next, Sandy adjusted the temperature of a mixture that had begun to show slight instability. She rotated the burner, raising heat in subtle increments while observing tiny bubbles forming at the surface. SpongeBob mirrored her motion, holding the beaker steady and stirring in gentle, consistent circles. Patrick leaned in, fascinated by the activity, nudging a bubble occasionally and producing a soft, resonant tap. The combined motions, subtle hisses, and gentle swirls created a living auditory and visual rhythm within the laboratory. Temperature adjustments were gradual. Sandy monitored the viscosity, bubble formation, and faint color changes in each mixture. SpongeBob's precise movements maintained continuity and stability, while Patrick's slow, exploratory gestures contributed to layered, gentle sounds. Each adjustment was carefully measured, creating a balance between chemical activity and auditory texture. The room thrummed with controlled energy, dense with sensory detail, yet calm and immersive. One mixture required cooling after minor overheating. Sandy rotated the burner to reduce heat gradually. SpongeBob tilted the beaker gently, stirring slowly to redistribute the liquid. Patrick observed the reaction with fascination, leaning in and producing small splashes and soft clinks as the mixture settled. The soft hiss of cooling liquid, combined with gentle metallic sounds and swirling motions, created a layered rhythm that reinforced the immersive quality of the lab. As Sandy moved from one station to another, adjusting temperatures, SpongeBob followed, maintaining rhythm and continuity. Patrick, slower and more deliberate, leaned closer to observe subtle changes, tiny bubbles forming, color gradients shifting, viscosity altering gradually. The trio's coordinated movements produced a dense, calming pulse of sound and motion, rich in detail yet gentle in intensity. Subtle heating adjustments continued across multiple stations. Sandy rotated burners incrementally, observing each reaction carefully. SpongeBob stirred each mixture with rhythmic precision, ensuring homogeneity. Patrick's slow gestures, tilting containers or tapping gently, contributed soft variations in the layered soundscape. The lab remained immersive, dense, and continuous, the steady hum of machinery blending seamlessly with the soft hisses and clinks of liquid and instruments. Every temperature adjustment had a visual counterpart. Faint color changes, tiny bubbles rising, and subtle steam wisps indicated precise chemical transformations. SpongeBob adjusted stirring speed to maintain consistency, while Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles or tilting vessels slowly. Sandy's precise oversight ensured balance, continuity, and immersive rhythm. Each movement and sound reinforced the ongoing flow, creating a seamless, calming, and dense atmosphere. The afternoon progressed with meticulous care. Sandy adjusted burners in small increments, observing reactions stabilize or accelerate subtly. SpongeBob mirrored her exact motions, stirring steadily and holding containers with attention. Patrick continued to explore slowly, producing a soft auditory variations that enriched the ambient texture. Each subtle hiss, gentle clink, and liquid swirl layered naturally into the continuous rhythm of the lab, sustaining a dense and immersive experience. Sandy then moved to a mixture that required precise balancing of heat and stirring. She rotated the burner with deliberate care, observing tiny bubbles form and rise slowly. SpongeBob stirred with consistent rhythm, ensuring even distribution of temperature throughout the mixture. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the transformation, nudging bubbles gently and producing soft clinks. The combination of controlled heat, slow motion, and layered sounds created a dense, immersive atmosphere, perfect for long periods of observation or relaxation. Mid-afternoon brought more subtle adjustments. Sandy monitored viscosity and reaction speed, making small increments of heat or stirring. SpongeBob maintained precise, rhythmic motions. Patrick contributed soft variations through exploratory gestures, tapping lightly or nudging bubbles. The layered auditory environment, the faint hiss of heating, the bubbling of liquids, the gentle clink of instruments remained continuous, dense, and immersive, reinforcing the rhythm of careful, deliberate experimentation. Sandy rotated among multiple stations, balancing heat and motion simultaneously. SpongeBob followed in perfect sync, stabilizing containers and stirring uniformly. Patrick's slower, tentative movements continued to enrich the soundscape with soft clinks and gentle splashes. The lab functioned as a cohesive, living system, dense with sound, motion, and observation, immersive yet calm, continuous and rhythmic. The final set of temperature adjustments for the small reactions required extreme precision. Sandy rotated burners and adjusted stirring rates minutely. SpongeBob maintained exact timing and motion, stabilizing vessels and following each instruction. Patrick leaned in, moving slowly and producing subtle, unpredictable variations in sound. Tiny bubbles rose and popped, faint hisses emitted from heated liquids, and soft metallic clinks echoed as instruments were nudged or repositioned. Each element contributed to a dense, immersive rhythm that persisted without interruption. By late afternoon, the small reactions had reached a stable balance. Tiny bubbles floated slowly to the surface, color gradients glimmered faintly, and subtle steam rose into the air. SpongeBob stirred gently, ensuring continued uniformity, while Patrick's slower gestures added soft, layered auditory textures. Sandy oversaw the results, confirming that every mixture had achieved the desired reaction state. The lab's environment remained dense, immersive, and continuous, combining precise motion with gentle variation and producing a rhythmic, calming atmosphere suitable for observation, relaxation, or sleep. The afternoon's temperature adjustments had transformed the lab into a living ecosystem of dense motion, sound, and visual detail. Every bubble, every stir, every subtle clink contributed to a continuous pulse. SpongeBob's precise actions maintained consistency. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added gentle texture, and Sandy's oversight ensured harmony. The small reactions, now stabilized and enhanced by careful heat management, provided a foundation for the next stage of experiments, dense with sensory richness and immersive rhythm. As the sun began to lower, filtering a softer, warmer light through the tree dome, Sandy paused briefly to review her notes. SpongeBob mirrored her review, checking vessels and stirring gently. Patrick observed quietly, fascinated by the subtle interplay of light, color, and motion. The lab continued to hum with quiet energy, a dense, layered environment of visual, auditory, and kinetic stimuli. Every motion, every sound, every minor shift reinforced a continuous rhythm, immersing the trio fully in the gentle pulse of controlled experimentation. The adjustments had concluded for now, leaving the mixtures stable, the lab rhythm maintained, and the atmosphere calm yet dense with sensory detail. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick moved slowly, tidying instruments and preparing for the next stage. Soft hisses, gentle clinks, swirling liquids, and faint hums persisted, layering into a seamless texture that defined the immersive environment. The laboratory, alive with controlled energy, remained a sanctuary of precise motion, subtle sound, and continuous rhythm, setting the stage for further experimentation and long hours of calm, detailed observation. The laboratory of Sandy Cheeks had settled into a serene, controlled rhythm as late afternoon deepened. Sunlight slanted through the tree dome, filtering through the water to create subtle, moving patterns on the floor and across the trays of stabilized mixtures. The air carried a gentle warmth from the small burners, still maintaining the optimal temperatures for each solution, while faint wisps of steam curled upward from the mixtures, adding texture to the room's atmosphere. Each sound, each movement contributed to a continuous immersive environment of calm focus. Sandy began the next phase, careful observation and detailed notation of each reaction. She moved systematically from station to station, examining the mixtures with deliberate precision. Tiny bubbles floated slowly to the surface, color gradients shifted imperceptibly, and faint currents stirred the liquids with gentle ripples. SpongeBob mirrored each of her movements, holding beakers steady and adjusting stirring rods subtly to maintain homogeneity. Patrick leaned forward, his slow, deliberate gestures adding soft taps and faint splashes to the ambient soundscape. The first observation involved a series of lightly bubbling mixtures. Sandy examined the size and frequency of bubbles, the rate of color change, and the subtle shifts in texture. SpongeBob carefully recorded each detail, his movements precise and rhythmic. Patrick's curiosity produced small variations. He nudged a bubble with a rod or tapped a beaker lightly, adding a gentle layer of sound that complemented the continuous hissing, swirling, and clinking of the laboratory. Each subtle noise reinforced the immersive density of the environment. Sandy moved next to a set of mixtures displaying gradual color shifts. She tilted the vessels slightly, observing how the light interacted with the liquid and how small currents caused faint variations in hue. SpongeBob followed her movements, maintaining rhythm and ensuring stability. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the slow transformation, tapping lightly and producing soft clinks that added texture to the auditory landscape. The combined motions of the three created a continuous layered rhythm of observation, motion, and sound. Each observation was meticulous. Sandy noted subtle differences in viscosity, bubble formation, and coloration, marking diagrams and charts with careful, deliberate strokes. SpongeBob replicated her motions in tandem, maintaining steady stirring or adjusting vessel positions to preserve uniformity. Patrick contributed gentle variations in movement and sound, leaning closer or nudging a bubble with curiosity. Every soft hiss, faint clink, and liquid swirl became part of the dense, immersive rhythm of the lab. The next set of mixtures required detailed timing. Sandy observed reactions at regular intervals, noting how the bubbles expanded, merged, or dissipated. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, recording results while stabilizing vessels and stirring gently. Patrick moved slower, producing soft, unpredictable variations in sound and motion that enriched the texture without disrupting continuity. The laboratory environment remained dense, calm, and immersive, each participant contributing to a flowing rhythm of sensory input. Sandy rotated among the stations, maintaining focus on the intricate details of the reactions. She adjusted observation angles, tilted containers, and noted minute color variations. SpongeBob followed with synchronized movements, ensuring stability and continuous stirring where necessary. Patrick's slower gestures added a subtle auditory layer. Faint splashes, soft taps, and gentle nudges that complemented the ongoing hisses and metallic clinks. Each action, sound, and observation became part of a continuous immersive cycle. The mixtures themselves seemed to respond to the care with which they were observed. Tiny bubbles rose slowly, merging and dispersing with delicate motion. Colors shifted imperceptibly, currents formed faint ripples, and gentle hisses accompanied the subtle activity. SpongeBob's rhythmic stirring maintained consistency, while Patrick leaned closer, exploring the reactions with soft, slow movements. Sandy's precise attention ensured that all observations were recorded accurately and that the delicate balance of the lab's atmosphere remained undisturbed. In the middle of the observation period, Sandy focused on a set of mixtures that displayed gradual reactions over time. She rotated vessels, tilting them to catch the light and observe minute changes in texture. SpongeBob stirred carefully, keeping the liquids uniform, while Patrick leaned in to watch, occasionally nudging a bubble or tapping lightly on a beaker. The soft, layered sounds, the hissing of reactions, gentle clinks, subtle swirls blended seamlessly into the continuous ambient rhythm of the laboratory. Every movement was intentional, yet infused with calm patience. Sandy's notes became a map of the mixture's transformations, charting subtle variations in color, viscosity, and bubble formation. SpongeBob's precise action supported continuity, while Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added texture. Each detail contributed to the immersive, dense rhythm, reinforcing the sense of quiet focus that had defined the lab since morning. Sandy then observed the thermal reactions across several stations, noting how mixtures responded to slight differences in temperature. SpongeBob adjusted stirring speed to maintain uniformity, tilting containers subtly to encourage even distribution. Patrick's gentle movements, tapping a beaker, nudging a bubble, leaning closer, added soft auditory variations that enriched the immersive soundscape. The laboratory remained alive, a dense ecosystem of motion, sound, and careful attention. As late afternoon deepened, Sandy moved systematically through her diagrams, cross-referencing notes with observations. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, maintaining rhythm and precision in stirring and recording results. Patrick continued to provide soft, layered variations, producing gentle sounds that blended with the hissing of mixtures, the metallic clinks of instruments, and the subtle swirls of liquids. Every detail reinforced the continuous flow, creating a calm, immersive atmosphere dense with sensory richness. Sandy focused next on the most delicate reactions, those that required patience and careful timing. Tiny bubbles rose slowly, colors shifted subtly, and faint currents moved through the mixtures. SpongeBob stirred gently and steadily, ensuring uniformity. Patrick leaned in, moving slowly and producing soft, unpredictable variations in sound and motion. The room's ambient rhythm, the combination of hisses, clinks, swirls, and soft human movement, remained dense and continuous, providing a layered, calming auditory environment. Observation extended over hours. Sandy maintained focus, moving slowly from one station to the next, noting every change. SpongeBob mirrored each motion, stabilizing vessels, stirring, and recording observations. Patrick, slower and more exploratory, added gentle variations in sound and movement, enriching the auditory landscape. The laboratory functioned as a living, breathing system, dense with rhythm, motion, and sensory detail, continuously immersive and calming. Sandy then began detailed notation, transferring observations from visual diagrams to written charts. SpongeBob assisted, moving steadily to ensure continuity and accuracy, while Patrick leaned closer, occasionally producing soft sounds with curious taps or nudges. Each recorded observation became part of the ongoing cycle of motion and attention, reinforcing the immersive rhythm. The room remained dense with gentle sounds, subtle hisses from the mixtures, soft clinks of instruments, the gentle swish of stirring rods, and the quiet scrape of Sandy's pen on paper. The final observations of the afternoon focused on subtle interactions between mixtures. Sandy rotated beakers, stirred gently, and noted minor changes in color and texture. SpongeBob mirrored her motions, ensuring stability and rhythm. Patrick moved slowly, nudging tiny bubbles, tilting vessels, and producing soft, layered sounds. The combination of precise action, gentle exploration, and continuous ambient noise created a dense, immersive environment, rich in sensory detail and calming energy. By evening, the first phase of observation and notation was complete. Sandy had meticulously recorded every subtle reaction, SpongeBob had maintained consistent rhythm and precision, and Patrick had contributed gentle, layered variations to the auditory texture. The lab remained dense with soft hisses, bubbling, swirling liquids, metallic clinks, and the faint scrape of writing instruments. The continuous flow of motion, sound, and observation had created an immersive, calming environment, perfect for reflection, study, or relaxation. As the sun began to set outside the tree dome, Sandy paused to review her charts, ensuring that every detail aligned with her observations. SpongeBob mirrored her review, moving slowly and gently to stabilize vessels and maintain rhythm. Patrick leaned back slightly, watching the subtle movements of liquids, the rise of tiny bubbles, and the soft interplay of colors. The laboratory, alive with controlled motion, sound, and observation, remained dense, immersive, and continuous, a sanctuary of calm and precise focus. The atmosphere was rich and layered, each element contributing to the overall rhythm. Every soft hiss, gentle clink, slow stir, and faint movement reinforced the immersive environment. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick moved together in coordinated harmony, sustaining the dense flow of observation and notation. The lab's pulse continued, steady and unbroken, a living testament to careful attention, deliberate motion, and layered sensory detail. Evening settled over the tree dome, casting warm, soft light across the laboratory. Sandy placed her pen down and took a moment to observe the calm, stabilized mixtures. SpongeBob gently adjusted a stirring rod, while Patrick leaned back, eyes wide with a quiet fascination. The lab, dense with rhythm, motion, and sound, remained a continuous environment of calm focus, preparing the trio for the next stage of experimentation. Evening settled over the tree dome, casting long, warm streaks of sunlight across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The air shimmered gently from the warmth of the remaining burners, the faint hisses of steam rising from stabilized mixtures blending with the soft clinks of glass instruments and the steady hum of machinery. Sandy moved with deliberate care, circling the room as she began the next phase of experimentation, observing subtle, unexpected variations in the mixtures and adjusting reactions with precision. SpongeBob followed closely, mirroring Sandy's careful movements. His small hands stabilized beakers and stirred gently to maintain continuity, each motion synchronized with her rhythm. Patrick, slower and more deliberate, leaned forward to observe tiny changes in color or the formation of small bubbles, producing soft splashes and gentle taps that became part of the immersive auditory landscape. The laboratory was alive with layered, continuous sounds, hissing liquids, gentle metallic clinks, swirling solutions, and the subtle scraping of Sandy's pen against paper as she noted observations. Sandy began by examining a mixture that had shown a minor, unexpected color shift during observation. She rotated the vessel slowly, tilting it to catch the light and observe subtle gradients forming across the liquid. SpongeBob stirred gently, ensuring that the movement remained uniform. Patrick leaned in closer, nudging a tiny bubble with a stirring rod, producing a delicate sound that layered naturally with the hissing of the liquid and the soft metallic clinks of nearby instruments. Every subtle noise reinforced the immersive, dense rhythm of the laboratory. The first unexpected reaction required careful adjustment. Sandy rotated a burner slightly, increasing heat in minuscule increments while observing changes in viscosity and bubble formation. SpongeBob's precise stirring maintained the uniformity of the mixture, while Patrick's slower gestures added soft, unpredictable sounds to the continuous texture. Tiny bubbles rose slowly, merging and dispersing, while faint color shifts occurred with subtle gradients. The combined effect created a dense, layered sensory environment, immersive and calming. Sandy moved to another station, where a mixture produced a slightly faster reaction than anticipated. She adjusted the heat downward gradually, observing how the small bubbles slowed their ascent and how the color stabilized. SpongeBob mirrored her precise actions, tilting the beaker gently and stirring steadily. Patrick leaned forward, fascinated by the interplay of motion and color, tapping lightly on the side of a vessel or nudging a bubble with a rod. Each soft tap, clink, and hiss layered into the ongoing ambient soundscape, dense and continuous. Some reactions exhibited subtle textures in the liquid, small ripples forming across the surface as the mixtures responded to heat or slight movement. Sandy observed these ripples carefully, noting their formation in her diagrams. SpongeBob maintained consistent stirring, guiding the mixture without disrupting the delicate pattern. Patrick's slower gestures contributed additional auditory layers, faint splashes, soft metallic taps, and gentle nudges that enriched the environment. The lab operated as a living, breathing system, dense with sound, motion, and observation. As night approached outside the tree dome, Sandy began a series of controlled experiments to gently provoke additional reactions. She combined small amounts of stabilized mixtures in new sequences, observing the slow rise of bubbles, the shifting of colors, and the subtle creation of tiny currents within the liquid. SpongeBob followed in perfect synchronization, stirring steadily, stabilizing containers and observing minute changes. Patrick leaned closer, nudging a bubble or tapping lightly, producing soft, layered sounds that complemented the natural hisses, clinks, and swirls. One mixture displayed unexpected frothing along the surface, tiny bubbles merging and dispersing in the delicate patterns. Sandy adjusted the heat slightly, observing how this influenced the reaction. SpongeBob stirred in a controlled rhythm, ensuring uniform consistency. Patrick's gentle, slower gestures added soft sounds, contributing to a dense, immersive auditory texture. The laboratory was a living ecosystem of motion and sound, each element layered and continuous, perfectly balanced between precision and gentle unpredictability. Sandy rotated through several stations, observing minor variations and recording every detail. SpongeBob mirrored each movement, maintaining rhythm and stability, while Patrick explored with curiosity, producing soft, gentle sounds as he nudged bubbles or tapped instruments lightly. Each hiss, swirl, and clink layered into the ongoing flow, reinforcing the immersive, dense environment of the laboratory. Temperature adjustments continued alongside the observation of unexpected reactions. Sandy rotated burners with small increments, observing the rise and fall of tiny bubbles and the gradual deepening of color. SpongeBob tilted and stirred containers carefully, maintaining uniformity, while Patrick moved slowly, leaning in to examine the subtle transformations and contributing faint, gentle sounds. The continuous interplay of motion, sound, and observation produced a dense, calming rhythm that defined the laboratory's evening energy. Some reactions produced faint wisps of vapor that hovered just above the surface of the mixtures. Sandy observed these vapors carefully, noting their density and motion. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, adjusting stirring speed to maintain even consistency. Patrick's slow, exploratory gestures nudged tiny bubbles or lightly tapped beakers, adding delicate sounds that enhanced the immersive quality of the room. The ambient hisses, clinks, and swirls combined to form a continuous layered soundscape, dense yet calm. Sandy then combined two mixtures that had remained stable during earlier observation. The resulting reaction was gentle but produced unexpected tiny bubbles that moved in intricate, slow patterns. SpongeBob stirred carefully, following Sandy's precise rhythm to ensure homogeneity. Patrick leaned closer, watching the slow formation of bubbles and gently tapping the side of a container, producing a soft metallic resonance. The subtle bubbling, faint hissing, and soft clinks created a continuous, immersive auditory environment. As the night deepened, Sandy focused on a set of reactions that exhibited gradual color shifts. She rotated each vessel slowly, tilting them to catch the light and observe patterns forming across the liquid surface. SpongeBob mirrored each motion, stirring gently and maintaining uniformity. Patrick leaned in, fascinated, nudging tiny bubbles with a stirring rod and producing soft, layered sounds that blended seamlessly into the ambient rhythm. The lab remained dense and immersive, filled with continuous gentle motion and sound. Every reaction required careful observation. Sandy noted the size and frequency of bubbles, subtle gradients of color, and changes in viscosity, marking details in her diagrams. SpongeBob maintained consistent stirring and precise vessel adjustments. Patrick contributed soft, unpredictable variations in sound and movement. Each hiss, clink, and swirl reinforced the continuous immersive flow of the laboratory, creating a calm, dense, and detailed sensory experience. By late evening, the small, unexpected reactions had been gently guided to stability. Tiny bubbles floated slowly, colors shifted gradually, and faint vapors lingered above the mixtures. SpongeBob stirred steadily to maintain homogeneity, while Patrick leaned back slightly, observing the gentle motions with quiet fascination. Sandy recorded the final observations, ensuring accuracy and noting every subtle transformation. The laboratory, dense with layered motion, sound, and visual detail, remained immersive and calm, a sanctuary of precise focus and gentle unpredictability. The evening's work created a unique rhythm in the lab: soft hisses, slow bubbling, gentle clinks of instruments, faint swirls of liquid, and the steady hum of equipment. Each sound and motion layered naturally, producing a continuous, dense atmosphere. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick moved in harmony, their coordinated actions forming a living pulse within the laboratory. The unexpected reactions had been carefully controlled, creating a delicate balance of curiosity, observation, and immersive sensory experience. As the tree dome darkened with night, Sandy paused to review the day's work. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, stirring gently and stabilizing vessels. Patrick leaned closer, eyes wide with fascination, quietly observing the slow rise of tiny bubbles and the soft interaction of colors. The laboratory remained alive with dense, layered sound and motion, a controlled ecosystem of gentle hisses, clinks, swirls, and the subtle scraping of instruments. The immersive flow persisted uninterrupted, calm and continuous, setting the stage for the next day's experiments. The final moments of Chapter 7 solidified the rhythm of the evening. Sandy's careful adjustments, SpongeBob's precise movements, and Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures combined to create a continuous, immersive environment. Tiny bubbles floated gently, colors shifted subtly, and soft sounds of motion, heat, and liquid combined to form a dense, layered, and calming atmosphere. The lab's pulse, unbroken and steady, reflected a perfect balance of control, observation, and gentle unpredictability, preparing the trio for the following stages of experimentation. Night had fully settled over the tree dome, the soft glow of equipment and the dimming sunlight casting gentle reflections across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The air was warm and slightly humid from the previous reactions, with faint wisps of steam curling above stabilized mixtures. The faint, continuous hum of the lab's machinery blended with soft hisses from heated liquids, the gentle clinks of glass and metal instruments, and the swirls of stirring rods. Sandy moved deliberately, her motions fluid and precise, guiding the next phase, combining multiple mixtures into complex reactions, layering sensory details, and maintaining total control. SpongeBob followed closely, his hands steady as he mirrored each of Sandy's careful movements. Each stir, tilt, and pour was executed with rhythmic precision, maintaining the delicate balance of the lab. Patrick moved more slowly, his gestures tentative yet curious. He leaned over tables, gently tapping beakers, nudging bubbles with a stirring rod, and tilting containers to observe subtle currents, adding soft, layered auditory textures that enriched the dense, immersive atmosphere. The first complex combination required merging 3 previously stabilized mixtures. Sandy lifted a container carefully, tilting it slowly as the liquid poured in a steady stream. The soft hiss of the mixture merging, the gentle bubbling that followed, and the faint ripple across the surface produced a rich, layered soundscape. SpongeBob stirred immediately, maintaining uniformity, his small hands moving rhythmically to sustain the mixture's consistency. Patrick leaned closer, nudging a bubble or tapping lightly, producing subtle variations in sound that blended seamlessly into the ambient noise. As the mixture reacted, tiny bubbles formed and rose slowly to the surface. Colors began to shift, faint gradients appearing in delicate layers across the liquid. Sandy rotated the vessel slightly, observing the patterns with meticulous care. SpongeBob's stirring complemented her movements, ensuring even distribution. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added soft auditory textures, faint clinks, gentle splashes, and the occasional metallic tap. The lab's atmosphere was dense, immersive, and continuous, layered with visual and auditory stimuli that created a calming rhythm. Next, Sandy combined a mixture that required simultaneous heating and stirring. She adjusted the burner in small increments, watching the reaction unfold slowly. SpongeBob mirrored her motions precisely, maintaining steady stirring, while Patrick leaned closer, intrigued by the rising bubbles and faint color transitions. The soft hissing of heated liquid, combined with swirling sounds and Patrick's gentle taps, produced a continuous layered soundscape. Each element, movement, reaction, and sound integrated naturally into the rhythm of the laboratory. Sandy then introduced a controlled secondary reaction, pouring a small quantity of a reactive mixture into a stable solution. Tiny bubbles formed along the surface, slowly merging into larger formations. SpongeBob stirred carefully, following Sandy's precise tempo, while Patrick's soft nudges and taps added subtle auditory variations. The reaction produced faint wisps of vapor, which curled upward and shimmered in the dim light, enhancing the visual immersion of the lab. The continuous layering of hisses, clinks, and swirls created a dense, calm, and engaging sensory environment. Each subsequent combination was equally intricate. Sandy worked systematically, aligning mixtures in precise sequences and observing their interactions. SpongeBob maintained rhythm and stability, tilting vessels, stirring slowly, and adjusting positions as needed. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures contributed soft, gentle sounds that complemented the hissing, bubbling, and swirling of liquids. The laboratory functioned as a living system, dense with layered motion, sound, and observation, continuously immersive and calming. Some combinations produced unexpected patterns of bubbles, which formed slow, intricate dances across the surface of the liquids. Sandy observed these patterns carefully, noting their formation in her diagrams. SpongeBob's precise stirring ensured uniform distribution, while Patrick leaned closer to examine the movements, producing faint clinks and soft splashes that enhanced the ambient texture. The interplay of careful observation, rhythmic motion, and layered sound created a dense, immersive environment perfect for relaxation or prolonged focus. The next sequence required subtle temperature adjustments during the combination of multiple reactive mixtures. Sandy rotated burners minutely, observing the rate of bubble formation and the gradual deepening of color. SpongeBob stirred in synchronized motion, ensuring homogeneity. Patrick's slow gestures nudged bubbles or tapped lightly, adding delicate layers of sound. The combined auditory environment, hisses, clinks, swirls, and subtle human movements remained continuous and immersive. Sandy then focused on the visual aspect of the reactions, tilting containers to observe light refracting through shifting gradients of color. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, stirring slowly to maintain consistency, while Patrick leaned closer to watch, producing soft, unpredictable sounds as he nudged tiny bubbles or tapped lightly on a vessel. The interplay of visual motion and auditory layering created a rich, dense, and calming environment. By the middle of the evening, the lab was alive with complex combinations. Tiny bubbles floated slowly, merging and dispersing in rhythmic patterns. Colors shifted gradually, producing subtle gradients across the surfaces of the mixtures. SpongeBob maintained precise, rhythmic stirring to ensure uniformity. Patrick contributed slower, exploratory movements, producing gentle sounds that blended naturally with the hissing, bubbling, and swirling already present. Sandy's careful oversight ensured that the intricate reactions remained balanced and controlled. Sandy rotated among multiple stations, adjusting stirring speed, tilting vessels, and monitoring temperature with careful precision. SpongeBob followed seamlessly, maintaining rhythm and consistency. Patrick leaned in, fascinated by the interplay of color, motion, and bubbles, producing soft variations in sound that enriched the immersive texture. Each gentle hiss, subtle clink, and soft swirl layered naturally into the dense, continuous rhythm of the laboratory. Some complex mixtures began to display layered reactions within the same vessel. Tiny bubbles formed slowly, rising and merging in delicate, intricate patterns. Sandy observed carefully, tilting the container and noting every detail in her diagrams. SpongeBob stirred with gentle precision, following her exact tempo. Patrick's slower movements added subtle auditory nuances, tapping lightly or nudging bubbles with soft, deliberate gestures. The lab remained a living, layered ecosystem of sound, motion, and observation. Temperature adjustments continued to accompany the combinations. Sandy rotated burners and observed how heat affected viscosity, bubble formation, and color gradients. SpongeBob mirrored her motions, stirring and adjusting vessels to maintain homogeneity. Patrick's slow, curious gestures, leaning in, tapping lightly, or nudging bubbles, added delicate layers of sound. The laboratory remained dense, continuous, and immersive, with every subtle movement and reaction contributing to a calming, rhythmic environment. Sandy then combined a series of mixtures that required extremely precise timing. Tiny amounts of one solution were added to another in slow, deliberate pours. SpongeBob stirred in synchronization, holding vessels steady. Patrick leaned closer, watching the delicate interactions, gently tapping or nudging bubbles. The reactions created faint hisses, slow bubbling, and subtle swirls that layered into the ambient soundscape. Each element, motion, sound, and observation reinforced the dense, immersive rhythm of the laboratory. As night deepened, the combined reactions began to stabilize. Tiny bubbles floated rhythmically, color gradients shifted subtly, and faint wisps of vapor rose from the mixtures. SpongeBob stirred gently to maintain uniformity, while Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures contributed soft, layered sounds. Sandy's precise observation ensured balance and control, sustaining the continuous immersive environment. By late evening, the complex combinations had produced a rich tapestry of motion, color, and sound. The lab was dense with layered auditory and visual textures, hissing, swirling, bubbling, clinking, and the subtle motions of human hands. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick moved in harmony, their coordinated actions forming a continuous pulse of controlled experimentation. The environment was immersive, calming, and richly detailed, providing the perfect setting for prolonged observation, relaxation, or sleep. The final moments of Chapter 8 left the laboratory in a state of dense, controlled equilibrium. Tiny bubbles floated gently to the surface, colors glimmered in subtle gradients, and soft sounds of hissing, clinking, and swirling persisted. SpongeBob's precise motions maintained consistency. Patrick's slower gestures added delicate layers, and Sandy's careful oversight ensured balance. The lab remained a continuous, immersive environment, alive with motion, sound, and visual detail, setting the stage for further experimentation and observation in the following chapters. Night had deepened over the tree dome, casting a soft, silvery glow through the laboratory windows. The dim light reflected gently off trays, beakers, and glass instruments, mingling with the faint warmth radiating from the burners beneath the mixtures. Wisps of steam rose slowly from stabilized solutions, curling and twisting as they caught the light. The laboratory hummed with life, a dense tapestry of motion, sound, and visual texture. Sandy cheeks moved deliberately, her hands steady and precise, preparing the next phase. Visually spectacular reactions designed to highlight subtle motions, vibrant colors, and layered auditory details. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's movements, small hands steady as he adjusted stirring rods, held vessels at precise angles, and monitored the delicate combinations. Patrick moved more slowly, leaning in curiously, gently nudging bubbles or tapping containers, producing soft clinks and faint splashes. The interplay of their movements created a dense, continuous rhythm. Every hiss of heated liquid, gentle clink of glass, and subtle swirl of mixture contributed to an immersive, layered environment that pulsed with calm energy. The first reaction of the evening involved merging 3 carefully stabilized solutions. Sandy lifted a beaker slowly, tilting it with precision as the liquid streamed into a larger vessel. The soft hiss of merging solutions was punctuated by tiny bubbles forming and rising in rhythmic patterns. SpongeBob stirred immediately, maintaining uniformity while following Sandy's exact tempo. Patrick leaned closer, nudging a bubble gently with a rod and producing a soft metallic tap that layered seamlessly into the ambient soundscape. As the mixture reacted, colors shifted gently. Gradients formed along the surface, moving slowly like liquid rainbows. Tiny bubbles merged and popped in delicate patterns, producing faint hissing sounds that blended with the soft swirls of stirred liquid. Sandy rotated the vessel carefully, observing every change, while SpongeBob maintained stirring with a precise rhythm. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added subtle variations in sound, creating an auditory depth that complemented the visual transformations. Next, Sandy introduced a mixture that required simultaneous heating and stirring. She rotated the burner in small increments, observing how the temperature affected bubble formation, viscosity, and color depth. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, stirring steadily and adjusting the angle of the vessel for uniform distribution. Patrick leaned closer, fascinated by the rising bubbles and shifting gradients, tapping lightly or nudging a tiny bubble with a rod. The combination of hisses, gentle clinks, and swirling liquids created a layered, immersive soundscape. The reactions produced delicate, intricate patterns. Bubbles formed in slow spirals, merging and dispersing in rhythmic sequences. Colors deepened, forming subtle transitions across the surface of the mixtures. Sandy observed these patterns meticulously, noting their flow in her diagrams. SpongeBob maintained consistent stirring, while Patrick added soft auditory textures through gentle nudges and taps. The laboratory became a living, breathing system of motion and sound, dense yet calming, continuous yet immersive. Sandy then combined a small amount of a reactive solution into a larger mixture, producing slow, controlled frothing along the surface. Tiny bubbles danced in gentle swirls, rising and merging in intricate patterns. SpongeBob stirred carefully, following Sandy's precise rhythm. Patrick leaned closer, curious, producing soft clinks and gentle splashes as he explored the motion of the bubbles. The interplay of delicate visual effects and layered sound created a dense, immersive environment that sustained a calming rhythm throughout the lab. Temperature adjustments accompanied the combinations. Sandy rotated burners in fine increments, observing how each mixture responded. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, stirring gently and tilting vessels as needed to maintain homogeneity. Patrick's slower gestures continued to add subtle, layered sounds. Faint taps, gentle splashes, and soft nudges of bubbles. The laboratory's soundscape was rich, dense, and continuous, blending hissing, bubbling, and clinking into a seamless auditory flow. Some reactions produced faint vapor that curled above the surface, reflecting the dim light and shimmering patterns. Sandy observed these vapors closely, noting density, movement, and the interaction with rising bubbles. SpongeBob tilted and stirred the mixtures carefully, ensuring uniform reactions. Patrick leaned in, fascinated, nudging bubbles and tapping lightly to produce soft, layered sounds. The combination of visual, auditory, and kinetic stimuli created a dense, immersive atmosphere perfect for focus, relaxation, or sleep. Sandy then focused on a series of reactions that required precise timing and delicate pours. Tiny amounts of one solution were added to another with extreme care. SpongeBob stirred in perfect synchronization, holding vessels steady and maintaining rhythm. Patrick leaned closer, observing tiny bubbles and shifting gradients, producing soft clinks and gentle splashes that layered naturally into the ongoing soundscape. Each hiss, swirl, and movement reinforced the immersive, continuous flow of the lab's environment. As the evening progressed, the mixtures produced slow, rhythmic displays. Tiny bubbles floated gracefully, merging and dissipating in intricate patterns. Colors transitioned gradually, forming soft gradients and subtle iridescence across the surfaces of the liquids. SpongeBob maintained precise, rhythmic stirring, ensuring consistency throughout each reaction. Patrick's exploratory gestures continued to add soft, gentle sounds, enhancing the layered, immersive atmosphere. Sandy's precise oversight ensured balance, rhythm, and continuity, preserving the integrity of the reactions and the calming environment. Sandy rotated among multiple stations, adjusting stirring rates, tilting vessels to observe visual effects, and monitoring temperatures with meticulous care. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, ensuring uniformity and rhythm, while Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added delicate variations in sound. Tiny bubbles merged, colors shifted, faint vapor rose, and soft hisses, clinks, and swirls layered seamlessly into the ambient environment. The laboratory functioned as a cohesive ecosystem of motion, sound, and observation. Some complex combinations produced subtle secondary reactions, creating layered bubbles and overlapping gradients. Sandy observed the effects, tilting vessels and adjusting stirring to guide the patterns. SpongeBob followed precisely, maintaining rhythmic consistency. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles gently or tapping containers to produce soft sounds. The resulting sensory environment was dense, continuous, and immersive, each element contributing to a calm, layered rhythm. Temperature adjustments remained critical. Sandy rotated burners minutely, observing how heat influenced bubble formation and color depth. SpongeBob stirred and tilted vessels carefully, maintaining uniformity. Patrick's slower, exploratory movements contributed subtle variations in sound. Faint metallic taps, soft splashes, gentle nudges. The laboratory's rhythm remained dense and immersive, layering auditory and visual textures into a continuous flow. By the late evening, the spectacular reactions had stabilized into intricate displays. Tiny bubbles floated in rhythmic patterns, colors shimmered in soft gradients, and faint wisps of vapor lingered above the mixtures. SpongeBob stirred gently to maintain consistency, while Patrick's slow gestures added layered auditory nuances. Sandy recorded observations carefully, ensuring precision and continuity. The lab, dense with motion, sound, and visual detail, remained immersive and calm, ready for the next stage of experimentation. The final moments of Chapter 9 solidified the laboratory's rhythm. Sandy's careful adjustments, SpongeBob's precise stirring, and Patrick's exploratory gestures created a continuous pulse of dense sensory stimuli. Tiny bubbles, soft hisses, gentle clinks, and swirling colors layered naturally into the immersive environment. The lab's atmosphere was rich and calming, maintaining balance between control and subtle unpredictability, perfect for relaxation, focus, or sleep. The tree dome was fully enveloped in night, the soft glow of underwater light filtering through the glass and casting gentle, shifting reflections across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The room felt warm, quiet, and dense with lingering aromas from the day's experiments. Wisps of steam rose lazily from the stabilized mixtures, curling and twisting in the gentle draft. The faint hum of equipment, combined with soft hisses, clinks, and the slow swirls of liquids, created a continuous immersive atmosphere. Sandy moved deliberately, beginning the phase of nighttime observation, a process that required heightened attention to subtle changes in light, color, and motion. SpongeBob followed closely, his small hands steady as he mirrored Sandy's careful movements. Each stir, tilt, and adjustment was synchronized to maintain the delicate balance of the laboratory. Patrick moved slower, leaning forward with curiosity, gently nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on containers, producing soft, layered sounds that blended seamlessly with the ambient hum. The lab's environment was dense, immersive, and continuous, a living ecosystem of motion, sound, and visual detail. The first observation involved mixtures that responded to cooler nighttime temperatures. Sandy tilted vessels slowly, observing the subtle slowing of bubble formation and the gradual deepening of color. SpongeBob mirrored each movement, stirring gently and maintaining uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, nudging tiny bubbles with a rod or tapping lightly on a beaker, producing soft metallic clinks that layered naturally into the ongoing soundscape. The combination of motion, hisses, clinks, and gentle swirls created a rich, dense rhythm. Sandy rotated a vessel to catch the soft overhead light, observing how subtle gradients shifted across the liquid surface. Tiny bubbles rose and merged in the slow, intricate patterns. SpongeBob's rhythmic stirring maintained consistency, while Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added subtle auditory texture. Each hiss, swirl, and faint clink layered seamlessly, reinforcing the immersive, continuous flow of the laboratory. The nighttime phase emphasized subtle transformations. Sandy noted changes in viscosity, color, and bubble formation with meticulous care. SpongeBob maintained precise stirring and adjusted the angle of containers as necessary. Patrick's gentle taps and nudges produced soft, layered sounds that enriched the dense ambient environment. The interplay of motion, observation, and sound created a calm, immersive rhythm that carried through the night. Some reactions produced faint vapors that lingered above the mixtures, curling upward in delicate spirals. Sandy observed these vapors closely, tilting vessels to follow their movement. SpongeBob mirrored her adjustments, stirring slowly to maintain homogeneity. Patrick leaned closer, intrigued by the swirling vapors, producing soft clinks and gentle splashes. The laboratory became a living tapestry of motion, sound, and visual stimuli, dense yet calm, continuous yet immersive. Sandy then focused on mixtures that displayed gradual luminescence in low light. Tiny bubbles captured reflections of the dim glow, producing soft, shifting patterns across the surface. SpongeBob stirred carefully, maintaining uniformity and rhythm. Patrick moved slowly, leaning in to observe, gently tapping or nudging bubbles with soft, deliberate gestures. The subtle sounds of hissing, clinking, and swirling liquids combined with the visual display to create a rich, dense, and immersive environment. Temperature adjustments continued subtly. Sandy rotated burners minimally, observing the rate of bubble formation and color shifts. SpongeBob mirrored her motions, stirring and tilting vessels gently. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added soft auditory layers, faint taps, gentle nudges, and small splashes. The combined effect was a continuous, layered, and immersive sensory environment, calm yet rich in detail. Sandy introduced a controlled secondary reaction, gently combining two stabilized mixtures to observe subtle nighttime effects. Tiny bubbles formed in delicate spirals, rising and merging slowly. SpongeBob stirred with precision, ensuring homogeneity. Patrick leaned closer, observing the patterns, nudging bubbles lightly, and producing soft clinks that enhanced the layered auditory texture. The laboratory remained dense, continuous, and immersive, filled with subtle motion, sound, and visual interest. Observation extended over hours. Sandy moved systematically among stations, rotating vessels, tilting containers, and noting changes in her diagrams. SpongeBob maintained rhythmic, precise movements to stabilize mixtures and ensure consistent stirring. Patrick contributed soft, exploratory sounds that layered naturally into the ambient soundscape. Faint taps, gentle splashes, and subtle nudges. Each motion, hiss, and clink reinforced the continuous immersive rhythm of the laboratory. Some mixtures displayed intricate bubble patterns that shifted slowly over time. Sandy observed these with careful attention, noting every formation in her diagrams. SpongeBob's precise stirring ensured even distribution. Patrick leaned closer, tapping lightly or nudging bubbles, producing gentle sounds that complemented the ambient hisses and swirls. The lab's dense, layered environment remained continuous, immersive, and calming. By midnight, the mixtures had stabilized, producing slow, rhythmic displays of bubbles and soft color transitions. Tiny vapors curled above the surfaces, reflecting the dim light and subtle patterns. SpongeBob stirred gently to maintain uniformity, while Patrick's slow movements added soft, layered sounds. Sandy recorded detailed observations, ensuring that every transformation was noted accurately. The laboratory remained dense with motion, sound, and visual detail, immersive and calm, a sanctuary of focus and sensory richness. Sandy rotated among multiple stations, adjusting stirring speed, tilting vessels, and observing bubble behavior and color gradients. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, maintaining rhythm and precision. Patrick leaned in, exploring subtly, nudging bubbles, tapping lightly, producing delicate sounds. The combined auditory environment, hissin', clinkin', swirlin', and soft human interaction remained continuous and layered, enriching the immersive experience. Subtle, unexpected changes occurred in some mixtures, tiny bubbles forming intricate spirals, slow color shifts creating soft gradients, and faint wisps of vapor curling unpredictably. Sandy observed carefully, adjusting stirring or heat as needed. SpongeBob followed in synchronization, ensuring uniformity. Patrick contributed gentle auditory variations through slow, curious gestures. The laboratory pulse continued, dense, immersive, and calm, a continuous rhythm of motion, sound, and observation. The final hours of nighttime observation emphasized patience and close attention. Sandy rotated vessels slowly, tilting them to follow light reflections and bubble patterns. SpongeBob stirred with gentle precision, maintaining consistency. Patrick leaned in, producing soft taps or nudges that enriched the layered soundscape. The interplay of movement, visual detail, and sound created a dense, continuous, immersive environment. By the end of Chapter 10, the laboratory was calm, yet alive with subtle, layered stimuli. Tiny bubbles floated gracefully, colors shifted gradually, vapors curled in delicate spirals, and soft hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob's precise stirring, Patrick's slower gestures, and Sandy's careful oversight maintained balance, continuity, and density. The night's observations had produced an immersive rhythm, perfect for relaxation, prolonged focus, or sleep, establishing a deep sensory foundation for subsequent experimentation. The tree dome was bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent lights from the surrounding underwater flora, casting delicate, moving patterns across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The warmth of the lab mingled with the faint, lingering sense of the day's experiments. Wisps of steam rose slowly from stabilized mixtures, curling in gentle arcs as the low hum of equipment created a subtle, continuous pulse. Sandy moved with focused precision, initiating advanced nighttime experiments that emphasized light, motion, and layered sound. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's movements, small hands holding vessels steadily while stirring at precise intervals. Patrick moved more slowly, leaning forward, observing minute reactions, gently nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on containers. Every sound, the hissing of liquids, the soft clinks of glass, the swirls of stirring rods layered into the dense, immersive soundscape of the laboratory. Each element contributed to a continuous rhythmic environment, both common and detailed. The first experiment involved introducing a luminescent compound into a stable mixture. Sandy tilted a small beaker, allowing the liquid to flow slowly into the larger vessel. A faint glow spread through the mixture, illuminating tiny bubbles and subtle currents. SpongeBob stirred immediately, following Sandy's rhythm, ensuring uniform distribution. Patrick leaned closer, gently tapping a bubble with a rod, producing a soft metallic resonance that layered naturally with the gentle hisses and swirls. As the luminescent mixture reacted, tiny bubbles formed slow, intricate spirals, reflecting the soft glow and creating delicate patterns across the surface. Sandy rotated the vessel carefully, observing the shifting colors and motions. SpongeBob maintained precise stirring, while Patrick's slow exploratory gestures added subtle, layered auditory textures. The laboratory became a dense, immersive environment of visual and auditory detail, each element reinforcing the calming, continuous rhythm. Next, Sandy adjusted the temperature of a second mixture to enhance the visibility of faint luminescent effects. She rotated the burner in minuscule increments, observing how heat influenced bubble formation and color intensity. SpongeBob mirrored her motions, stirring gently while tilting the container for uniform results. Patrick leaned in closer, observing the subtle gradients and producing soft, layered sounds through gentle taps and nudges. The laboratory's atmosphere remained immersive, continuous, and rich with sensory detail. Some reactions produced faint vapors that caught the glow, curling and twisting spirals above the mixtures. Sandy observed the vapor's motion carefully, noting patterns in her diagrams. SpongeBob stirred slowly to maintain consistency. Patrick's tentative gestures added gentle auditory textures, soft metallic taps, faint splashes, and nudges that layered naturally with the ambient hisses and swirls. The environment was dense, immersive, and continuous, a living sensory ecosystem. Sandy then combined a carefully measured quantity of a reactive mixture into the luminescent solution. Tiny bubbles formed along the surface, rising slowly and merging into delicate spirals. SpongeBob stirred immediately, maintaining rhythm and uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, producing soft taps and gentle nudges that enriched the layered soundscape. Each element, the glowing bubbles, subtle hisses, swirling currents, and gentle clinks, added to the immersive depth of the laboratory. Temperature adjustments were subtle yet precise. Sandy rotated burners slightly to modulate reaction speed and color intensity. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, stirring carefully to maintain homogeneity. Patrick added slow, exploratory sounds through nudges and taps, blending seamlessly with the ambient hisses and swirling liquids. The laboratory remained dense, layered, and immersive, every action contributing to a continuous rhythm of motion and observation. Some mixtures displayed intricate interactions between luminescent compounds and previously stabilized solutions. Tiny bubbles formed complex, overlapping patterns, rising slowly and reflecting the soft glow. Sandy observed closely, tilting containers and adjusting stirring to guide the patterns. SpongeBob followed precisely, maintaining consistent, rhythmic motion. Patrick's gentle, exploratory gestures continued to add subtle auditory nuances. The lab's dense, layered environment remained continuous and immersive, calm yet richly detailed. Sandy rotated among multiple stations, adjusting stirring speed, tilting vessels, and monitoring temperature and luminescence. SpongeBob mirrored her actions, maintaining precise rhythm and stability. Patrick leaned closer, observing subtle interactions, producing soft, layered sounds that enhanced the auditory depth. Tiny bubbles, shifting colors, faint vapor, and gentle hisses combined to create a dense, immersive sensory experience. Some reactions produced secondary effects. Tiny luminescent trails following rising bubbles, slow color gradients forming across the surface, and delicate ripples moving through the liquid. Sandy observed carefully, adjusting heat and stirring to guide the reactions. SpongeBob maintained uniformity and rhythm, while Patrick's slow gestures enriched the ambient texture with soft, subtle sounds. The laboratory's continuous, dense environment of motion, sound, and visual detail remained immersive and calming. By midnight, the advanced nighttime experiments had reached a delicate equilibrium. Tiny, luminescent bubbles floated gracefully, colors shifted in gentle gradients, and faint vapors curled in twisting patterns above the mixtures. SpongeBob stirred slowly to maintain consistency. Patrick's slower gestures continued to add soft, layered auditory nuances. Sandy recorded her detailed observations, ensuring each transformation was noted with precision. The laboratory pulse was continuous and immersive. Hissing, swirling, clinking, and soft human movements layered naturally with visual stimuli. Floating bubbles, shifting gradients, and curling vapors. The advanced experiments created a rhythm both dense and calming, sustaining the immersive environment. Every small adjustment by Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick contributed to the overall flow, maintaining a perfect balance of control, observation, and gentle unpredictability. Sandy then focused on a particularly intricate combination, layering multiple luminescent compounds to observe the formation of complex patterns. Tiny bubbles rose in spirals, merging slowly to create delicate, overlapping structures. SpongeBob stirred with precise rhythm, maintaining the balance and uniformity of the mixture. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles gently or tapping lightly on a container, adding soft, layered auditory textures that enhanced the immersive depth of the laboratory. Temperature adjustments accompanied these combinations. Sandy rotated burners in minute increments to modulate reaction speed, viscosity, and luminescence. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, stirring carefully to maintain homogeneity. Patrick's slow gestures added subtle, layered sounds, gentle clinks, faint splashes, and soft nudges that blended seamlessly with ambient hisses and swirling liquids. The laboratory's immersive rhythm remained dense, continuous, and calming. Some mixtures produced visual effects that evolved over time, slow shifts in luminescent intensity, subtle patterns emerging on the surface, and faint trails of vapor reflecting the soft light. Sandy observed and recorded each transformation meticulously. SpongeBob maintained precise stirring, ensuring uniformity. Patrick continued to contribute soft, exploratory sounds, producing a layered auditory texture that complemented the visual spectacle. As the night deepened further, the lab reached its peak of immersive sensory richness. Tiny bubbles floated rhythmically, colors shimmered in soft gradients, faint vapors spiraled above the surfaces, and soft hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob's precise stirring, Patrick's exploratory gestures, and Sandy's careful oversight created a dense, continuous rhythm of motion, sound, and observation. The laboratory remained a living, immersive environment, perfect for prolonged focus, relaxation, or sleep. The final moments of Chapter 11 solidified the lab's nighttime rhythm. Sandy's adjustments, SpongeBob's stirring, and Patrick's slow exploratory gestures combined to form a continuous pulse of dense sensory stimuli. Tiny, luminescent bubbles, gentle hisses, swirling currents, and soft clinks layered naturally into the immersive environment. The laboratory's atmosphere was rich, calming, and perfectly balanced, blending control and subtle unpredictability and preparing the trio for the following night's experiments. The tree dome was quiet, bathed in the gentle, shifting glow of bioluminescent plants that cast delicate, fluid patterns across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The soft warmth of the equipment, mixed with lingering scents from previous experiments, creating a comforting, dense atmosphere. Wisps of steam rose lazily from stabilized mixtures, curling and twisting as they caught the soft light. The low hum of machinery blended seamlessly with the faint hisses, clinks, and slow swirls of liquids, forming a continuous layered soundscape. Sandy moved deliberately, initiating the next phase, observing the interaction of light and sound in advanced experiments. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's movements, small hands steady as he adjusted stirring rods, held vessels at precise angles, and monitored delicate reactions. Patrick moved more slowly, leaning in, gently nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on containers. Every sound, the hiss of liquids, the clinks of glass, and the soft swirls layered naturally into the dense, immersive environment of the lab. Each element contributed to a continuous rhythm, calming yet richly detailed. The first experiment involved a luminescent solution reacting to subtle stirring. Sandy rotated the vessel slowly, observing tiny bubbles rising in spirals, reflecting soft light across their surfaces. SpongeBob stirred in precise, rhythmic motions, maintaining uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, lightly tapping a bubble with a rod, producing a soft metallic resonance that complemented the gentle hisses and swirls of the mixture. The combination of motion, sound, and glowing bubbles created a rich, immersive environment. As the reaction continued, colors shifted gradually. Subtle gradients appeared along the surface of the liquid, moving with the rhythm of tiny bubbles. Sandy tilted the container carefully, observing the interplay of light and motion. SpongeBob's stirring maintained a steady, precise rhythm. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures added soft auditory textures, enriching the layered ambient soundscape. The laboratory became a dense, continuous, and immersive environment of visual and auditory stimuli. Next, Sandy introduced a controlled, secondary reaction, gently combining two luminescent mixtures. Tiny bubbles formed delicate spirals, rising slowly and merging in rhythmic patterns. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's precise movements, stirring carefully to maintain uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on the beaker, producing subtle, layered sounds. The combination of soft hisses, swirling currents, gentle clinks, and glowing bubbles created a harmonious, immersive environment. Temperature adjustments accompanied the combinations. Sandy rotated burners in small increments, observing how heat influenced bubble formation, luminescence intensity, and color depth. SpongeBob mirrored her motions, stirring gently while tilting vessels for even distribution. Patrick's slower gestures added delicate, layered auditory textures, including faint taps, gentle nudges, and soft splashes. The laboratory's dense, immersive rhythm remained continuous and calming. Some mixtures produced faint vapor that caught the glow of the luminescent solutions. Sandy observed the curling patterns of the vapor, noting interactions with rising bubbles. SpongeBob maintained gentle stirring to ensure uniformity. Patrick leaned in, curious, producing soft clinks and nudges that added subtle layers to the ambient soundscape. The lab became a living, layered system of motion, sound, and visual stimuli, dense and calming. Sandy then focused on a sequence of mixtures designed to produce synchronized visual and auditory effects. Tiny bubbles rose in rhythmic patterns, colors shifted gradually, and soft hisses resonated with the gentle clinks of instruments. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's precise motions, stirring carefully and adjusting vessels to maintain balance. Patrick leaned closer, observing the patterns, producing soft, layered sounds through taps, nudges, and gentle movements. The interplay of visual and auditory elements created a continuous, immersive environment. Observation extended over hours. Sandy moved methodically among stations, tilting vessels, adjusting stirring speed, and noting subtle variations in luminescence and bubble formation. SpongeBob maintained precise, rhythmic movements, ensuring consistency and stability. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures enriched the soundscape with delicate taps, nudges, and soft splashes. Each motion, hiss, and clink reinforced the dense, immersive rhythm of the laboratory. Some reactions displayed intricate visual patterns as tiny bubbles merged into overlapping spirals. Sandy observed these transformations carefully, recording every detail in her diagrams. SpongeBob's precise stirring ensured even distribution, while Patrick's soft exploratory gestures added layered auditory nuances. The laboratory remained dense, immersive, and continuous, a living ecosystem of motion, sound, and light. By the middle of the night, the combinations had produced a rich tapestry of sensory effects. Tiny bubbles floated rhythmically, colors shimmered in soft gradients, faint vapors twisted above mixtures, and gentle hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob stirred slowly to maintain homogeneity, while Patrick contributed subtle auditory textures through exploratory movements. Sandy's careful oversight preserved balance, continuity, and density, sustaining the immersive environment. Sandy rotated among multiple stations, adjusting stirring speed, tilting vessels, and monitoring luminescent intensity. SpongeBob mirrored each movement, maintaining precise rhythm and stability. Patrick leaned in, observing subtle interactions, nudging bubbles gently, tapping lightly, and adding soft sounds that enhanced auditory depth. Tiny bubbles, shifting colors, curling vapors, and gentle hisses layered seamlessly into the continuous flow of the laboratory. Some advanced combinations produced secondary visual effects, overlapping bubble patterns, gradual gradients shifting across surfaces, and faint trails of vapor reflecting light. Sandy adjusted stirring and heat carefully, guiding the reactions. SpongeBob followed in synchronized precision, while Patrick's slow, deliberate gestures continued to layer subtle sounds. The laboratory pulse remained dense, immersive, and calming. By the late night, the lab had reached an equilibrium of light and sound. Tiny bubbles floated in gentle spirals, colors shifted softly, faint vapor lingered above mixtures, and soft hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob stirred with careful rhythm. Patrick's slow movements contributed layered auditory textures, and Sandy recorded meticulous observations. The environment remained dense, immersive, and continuous, a perfect setting for prolonged relaxation, focus, or sleep. The final moments of Chapter 12 solidified the nighttime rhythm of the lab. Sandy's precise adjustments, SpongeBob's synchronized stirring, and Patrick's slow, exploratory gestures formed a continuous pulse of dense sensory stimuli. Tiny, luminescent bubbles, gentle hisses, swirling currents, and soft clinks layered naturally into the immersive environment. The laboratory's atmosphere was rich, calming and perfectly balanced, blending control and subtle unpredictability, ready for the next stage of advanced nighttime experiments. The tree dome was enveloped in the quiet of deep night, the soft bioluminescent glow of underwater flora casting gentle, shifting patterns across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The air was warm, subtly scented with remnants of previous reactions, and dense with the hum of equipment. Wisps of steam rose lazily from stabilized mixtures, curling in delicate arcs as soft light reflected off glass surfaces. The laboratory was alive with layered motion, sound, and visual detail. Sandy moved with deliberate precision, initiating intensified light and sound experiments designed to amplify the immersive quality of the environment. SpongeBob followed closely, small hands steady as he mirrored each of Sandy's movements, stirring solutions with precise rhythm, tilting containers, and monitoring delicate interactions. Patrick moved more slowly, leaning forward to observe, gently nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on vessels, producing soft clinks and subtle splashes that layered naturally into the continuous soundscape. Every hiss, swirl, and metallic tap reinforced the immersive, calming rhythm of the laboratory. The first experiment involved combining luminescent solutions to produce overlapping visual and auditory patterns. Sandy tilted a beaker carefully, allowing the liquid to flow in a steady stream into a larger vessel. Tiny bubbles formed spirals and merged slowly, reflecting the soft bioluminescent light. SpongeBob stirred immediately, following Sandy's precise tempo to maintain uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, nudging a bubble or tapping lightly, adding soft, layered sounds that enriched the ambient environment. As the reactions continued, the mixtures produced subtle gradients of color that shifted with the motion of tiny bubbles. Sandy rotated vessels, tilting them to observe light refractions across the spiraling currents. SpongeBob maintained rhythmic stirring, while Patrick's slow, exploratory gestures contributed gentle, layered auditory textures. The combination of glowing bubbles, swirling currents, and delicate sounds created a dense, immersive environment. Sandy introduced a controlled secondary reaction, gently combining two previously stabilized luminescent solutions. Tiny bubbles formed intricate spirals, rising slowly and merging in rhythmic patterns. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's precise movements, stirring carefully to maintain uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles and tapping lightly, producing subtle metallic sounds. The interplay of visual patterns and layered auditory textures intensified the immersive quality of the laboratory. Temperature adjustments were subtle yet essential. Sandy rotated burners in minuscule increments, observing how heat influenced bubble formation, luminescence, and color depth. SpongeBob stirred gently, tilting vessels to maintain even distribution. Patrick's slow gestures added delicate sounds, faint taps, nudges, and soft splashes that blended naturally with the ambient hisses and swirls. The laboratory remained dense, layered, and immersive, every motion contributing to the continuous rhythm. Some reactions produced faint vapor trails that caught the luminescent glow, curling and twisting above the mixtures. Sandy observed these patterns carefully, noting interactions with rising bubbles. SpongeBob maintained gentle stirring to ensure uniformity. Patrick leaned closer, producing soft clinks and nudges that enhanced the layered auditory texture. The lab became a continuous immersive ecosystem of motion, sound, and visual detail. Sandy focused on a series of mixtures designed to synchronize visual and auditory effects. Tiny bubbles rose rhythmically, colors shifted gradually, and faint hisses resonated with soft clinks of glass instruments. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's precise movements, stirring and adjusting containers to maintain balance. Patrick leaned closer, observing bubble patterns, nudging gently and producing soft, layered sounds. The interactions between visual and auditory elements created a continuous, immersive environment. Observation extended over several hours. Sandy moved methodically among stations, tilting vessels, adjusting stirring speed, and noting subtle variations in luminescence, bubble formation, and vapor trails. SpongeBob maintained precise rhythmic movements, ensuring stability and uniformity. Patrick's slow, exploratory gestures added soft, layered auditory textures that enhanced the immersive experience. Each motion, hiss, and clink reinforced the dense, continuous rhythm of the laboratory. Some mixtures displayed intricate, overlapping patterns as tiny bubbles merged and created spirals that interacted with faint gradients of color. Sandy observed carefully, recording each formation in her diagrams. SpongeBob stirred with precise rhythm, ensuring consistency. Patrick contributed gentle auditory textures through nudges, taps, and soft splashes. The laboratory remained dense, immersive, and continuous, a living ecosystem of motion, sound, and light. By midnight, the intensified experiments had reached equilibrium. Tiny luminescent bubbles floated in slow spirals, colors shimmered in soft gradients, faint vapors twisted above mixtures, and soft hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob stirred slowly to maintain homogeneity, while Patrick's exploratory gestures continued to add layered, delicate sounds. Sandy recorded meticulous observations, preserving details of each transformation. The laboratory pulse was continuous, immersive, and calming. Hissing, swirling, clinking, and subtle human movements combined with floating bubbles, shifting colors, and curling vapors to create a dense, layered sensory environment. Every adjustment made by Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick contributed to the immersive flow, maintaining a balance between precision, control, and gentle unpredictability. Sandy then initiated a particularly complex sequence, layering multiple luminescent compounds to observe interactions between color, bubble patterns, and vapor trails. Tiny bubbles rose in spirals, merging slowly into delicate, overlapping structures. SpongeBob stirred with rhythmic precision, maintaining uniformity and stability. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles gently, tapping lightly, producing subtle layered sounds that enhanced the immersive quality of the laboratory. Temperature adjustments accompanied these complex combinations. Sandy rotated burners in small increments to modulate reaction speed, viscosity, and luminescent intensity. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, stirring and tilting vessels carefully. Patrick's slower, exploratory gestures produced faint metallic taps, gentle nudges, and soft splashes. The laboratory's immersive rhythm remained dense, continuous, and calming, layering visual and auditory stimuli seamlessly. Some mixtures produced secondary effects, overlapping bubble spirals, shifting color gradients, and faint trails of vapor reflecting soft light. Sandy observed carefully, adjusting stirring and heat to guide the reactions. SpongeBob maintained precise motion and uniformity. Patrick's slow gestures enriched the ambient soundscape with subtle variations. The laboratory pulse remained dense, immersive, and continuous. By the late night, the intensified light and sound experiments had created a rich, harmonious sensory environment. Tiny bubbles floated rhythmically, colors shimmered in soft gradients, faint vapors curled above mixtures, and soft hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob's precise stirring, Patrick's slow, exploratory movements, and Sandy's meticulous oversight combined to form a continuous pulse of dense sensory stimuli. The laboratory remained alive, immersive, and calming, ready for the following night's experiments. The final moments of Chapter 13 solidified the laboratory's intensified nighttime rhythm. Sandy's adjustments, SpongeBob's synchronized stirring, and Patrick's gentle exploratory gestures layered naturally with tiny luminescent bubbles, swirling currents, soft hisses, and subtle clinks. The environment was rich, immersive, and perfectly balanced, blending control with subtle unpredictability, ideal for prolonged focus, relaxation, or sleep. The tree dome was bathed in deep night, the bioluminescent glow from surrounding flora reflecting softly across Sandy Cheek's laboratory. The air was warm, subtly scented from hours of chemical reactions, and dense with the hum of equipment. Wisps of steam rose lazily from stabilized mixtures, curling gently and catching the light, creating shifting patterns across tables and glassware. Every sound, the low hissing of liquids, the soft clinks of glass, and the continuous swirl of stirring rods layered into a dense, immersive symphony. Sandy moved deliberately, initiating the culmination of her nighttime experiments, where every visual, auditory, and kinetic element would combine in complex, synchronized patterns. SpongeBob followed closely, small hands steady as he mirrored Sandy's precise motions, stirring solutions, adjusting containers, and monitoring subtle interactions. Patrick moved more slowly, leaning in, gently nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on glassware, producing soft, layered sounds that enriched the ambient rhythm. Each hiss, swirl, and clink reinforced the immersive, calming atmosphere of the laboratory. The first culmination sequence involved the interaction of multiple luminescent mixtures. Sandy tilted a beaker carefully, letting a thin stream flow into a larger vessel. Tiny bubbles formed slow spirals, merging in intricate patterns while catching and reflecting the soft glow. SpongeBob stirred immediately, maintaining precise, rhythmic motion. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles or tapping lightly, creating subtle sounds that blended naturally with the gentle hisses and swirls. The laboratory became a dense, immersive environment of visual and auditory stimuli. As reactions continued, the mixtures produced gradients of color that shifted fluidly, influenced by bubble motion and stirring patterns. Sandy rotated vessels and adjusted angles, observing how light refracted through overlapping currents. SpongeBob maintained steady stirring, following her tempo exactly. Patrick's slower gestures, soft taps, gentle nudges, slight tilts added delicate auditory textures, layering with the ambient hisses and swirls. The laboratory's rhythm was continuous, dense, and deeply immersive. Next, Sandy introduced a secondary reaction, combining two stabilized luminescent solutions with careful timing. Tiny bubbles rose in spirals, merging slowly into intricate formations, while faint vapors began to twist above the mixture, reflecting soft light. SpongeBob stirred gently, maintaining uniformity, while Patrick leaned closer, observing patterns, nudging bubbles, and producing soft metallic taps. The interaction of light, motion, and sound intensified the immersive quality of the lab. Temperature adjustments accompanied these combinations. Sandy rotated burners in minuscule increments to modulate reaction speed, viscosity, and luminescence. SpongeBob mirrored her precise movements, stirring carefully and tilting vessels to maintain uniformity. Patrick's slow gestures produced delicate, layered sounds, faint clinks, nudges, and gentle splashes. The laboratory remained dense, immersive, and continuous, every action contributing to the flowing rhythm of motion, sound, and light. Some mixtures produced complex secondary effects, tiny bubbles forming overlapping spirals, gradual shifts in color gradients, and curling vapors that reflected the dim glow. Sandy observed carefully, adjusting stirring and heat to guide the reactions. SpongeBob maintained precise, rhythmic motion, while Patrick's soft gestures enriched the ambient soundscape. The laboratory's pulse was dense, layered, and immersive, blending visual, auditory, and kinetic stimuli seamlessly. Sandy then focused on creating synchronized visual and auditory patterns. Tiny bubbles rose rhythmically, colors shifted subtly, and soft hisses resonated with gentle clinks from instruments. SpongeBob mirrored Sandy's motions, stirring steadily and adjusting containers to maintain balance. Patrick leaned closer, observing bubble formations, nudging gently, tapping lightly, and adding soft, layered sounds. The combination of light, motion, and sound created a dense, immersive environment that held the full attention of the laboratory. Observation extended over several hours. Sandy rotated among stations, tilting vessels, adjusting stirring speeds and monitoring luminescence, bubble patterns, and vapor trails. SpongeBob maintained precise rhythmic movements, ensuring uniformity and stability. Patrick's slow, exploratory gestures added delicate auditory layers, enhancing the immersive quality. Every hiss, swirl, and soft clink contributed to the continuous rhythm of the laboratory. Some mixtures produced especially intricate visual effects. Tiny bubbles rose in spirals that overlapped and intertwined, colors shifted gradually in soft gradients, and faint vapors traced delicate arcs above the surface. Sandy observed every transformation meticulously, noting the movements in her diagrams. SpongeBob's precise stirring ensured uniformity, while Patrick's gentle gestures produced subtle sounds, complementing the ambient hisses and swirls. The laboratory remained dense, immersive, and continuous, a living system of layered stimuli. By midnight, the culmination of nighttime experiments had created a rich, harmonious sensory environment. Tiny, luminescent bubbles floated rhythmically, colors shimmered in soft gradients, faint vapors twisted above the mixtures, and gentle hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob stirred slowly, maintaining homogeneity. Patrick's exploratory gestures added layered, delicate auditory textures. Sandy recorded meticulous observations, ensuring each transformation was captured. The laboratory's pulse was continuous and immersive. Hissing, swirling, clinking, and subtle human movements layered naturally with floating bubbles, shifting colors, and curling vapors. Every adjustment made by Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick contributed to the immersive flow, sustaining a balance between precision, control, and gentle unpredictability. Sandy then orchestrated the final sequence of the night, layering multiple luminescent compounds to produce overlapping spirals, gradients, and vapor trails. Tiny bubbles rose in intricate, slow patterns, merging to create delicate structures. SpongeBob stirred with precise rhythm, maintaining uniformity and balance. Patrick leaned closer, nudging bubbles, tapping lightly, and producing subtle, layered sounds that enhanced the immersive sensory environment. Temperature adjustments accompanied the final combinations. Sandy rotated burners slightly to fine-tune reaction speed, bubble formation, and luminescent intensity. SpongeBob mirrored each movement, stirring carefully. Patrick's slow, deliberate gestures added faint taps, nudges, and soft splashes, seamlessly layering with hisses and swirls. The laboratory remained dense, continuous, and immersive, blending motion, light, and sound into a harmonious whole. By the early hours, the night experiments had reached their peak. Tiny luminescent bubbles floated rhythmically, colors shifted in delicate gradients, faint vapors spiraled above mixtures, and soft hisses and clinks persisted. SpongeBob's stirring, Patrick's slow movements, and Sandy's precise oversight formed a continuous pulse of dense sensory stimuli. The laboratory remained alive, immersive, and calming, perfect for prolonged focus, relaxation, or sleep. The final moments of Chapter 14 solidified the culmination of night experiments. Sandy's adjustments, SpongeBob's synchronized stirring, and Patrick's gentle exploratory gestures combined seamlessly with tiny luminescent bubbles, swirling currents, soft hisses, and delicate clinks. The environment was rich, immersive, and perfectly balanced, blending careful control with subtle unpredictability, setting the stage for the concluding chapter of the nighttime sequence. The tree dome was cloaked in the deepest hours of night. Soft, bioluminescent light from the surrounding underwater flora reflected across Sandy Cheek's laboratory, casting gentle, shifting patterns on every surface. The air was warm, subtly scented from the night's experiments, and dense with the continuous hum of machinery and faint hisses from the remaining mixtures. Wisps of vapor rose slowly, curling in gentle arcs and reflecting the soft light, while tiny bubbles drifted lazily across the surfaces of stabilized solutions. The laboratory was a living, layered environment of sound, motion, and visual texture, perfectly poised for the final phase of nighttime resolution. Sandy moved with deliberate precision, circulating through her stations one last time. Her hands adjusted stirring rods, tilted containers to observe the faintest shifts in bubble patterns, and recorded minute details in her diagrams. SpongeBob followed closely, small hands moving with careful rhythm, mirroring Sandy's motions while maintaining uniformity in the remaining mixtures. Patrick moved more slowly, leaning in to observe, gently nudging bubbles or tapping lightly on glassware, producing soft, layered sounds that blended seamlessly with the ambient hisses and swirls. The first task was to allow the mixtures to stabilize fully, observing how subtle changes unfolded naturally. Sandy rotated a vessel, tilting it to catch the soft reflections of bioluminescent light. Tiny bubbles formed slow spirals, rising gracefully to the surface, merging with others in intricate, delicate patterns. SpongeBob stirred gently, maintaining a continuous, rhythmic motion that kept the mixtures balanced. Patrick leaned closer, lightly tapping a bubble or nudging a vessel, adding soft auditory textures that enriched the layered soundscape. The laboratory remained dense, immersive, and continuous, alive with subtle motion and gentle sound. Next, Sandy introduced a phase of controlled cooling. Burners were gradually lowered, allowing temperature-sensitive mixtures to adjust slowly. SpongeBob mirrored her precise movements, stirring and tilting vessels to ensure even cooling and uniform distribution. Patrick's slower gestures, soft taps, gentle nudges, slight tilts, added subtle layers of sound that complemented the faint hisses and swirls of the mixtures. As temperatures dropped gradually, the luminescent solutions glowed more softly, casting gentle gradients across the surfaces and enhancing the calming visual environment. Sandy then focused on reducing movement in the mixtures while maintaining visual interest. Tiny bubbles that had risen in spirals began to float more slowly, merging gently at the surface. Faint vapors curled upward, catching the soft light and twisting in fluid arcs. SpongeBob stirred more slowly, decreasing motion incrementally while Patrick's exploratory gestures became softer and more deliberate, producing subtle, layered auditory textures. The laboratory pulse transitioned from a rhythmic hum to a gentle, continuous flow, dense yet deeply calming. Some mixtures displayed the most delicate effects during this final phase. Tiny bubbles formed overlapping patterns that moved imperceptibly. Colors softened into gentle gradients, and faint trails of vapor traced slow arcs above the liquids. Sandy observed every detail carefully, making subtle adjustments where necessary. SpongeBob maintained slow, precise stirring, ensuring that the balance of motion and visual patterning was preserved. Patrick leaned in gently, nudging bubbles or tapping lightly, enriching the ambient soundscape with quiet, layered textures. The laboratory remained immersive, continuous, and dense, a sanctuary of calm and focus. The next phase emphasized complete sensory harmony. Sandy adjusted the tilt of vessels to catch the softest reflections, observing interactions of light, motion, and vapor. SpongeBob mirrored her movements, stirring slowly and carefully. Patrick moved even more slowly, producing delicate, layered sounds with each tap or nudge. The interaction of luminescent bubbles, curling vapor, and soft, gentle hisses created a dense, immersive environment, perfectly balanced for relaxation or sleep. Temperature was monitored carefully as mixtures approached equilibrium. Sandy made subtle adjustments to burners, ensuring that cooling occurred gradually without disrupting bubble patterns or luminescent intensity. SpongeBob stirred in slow, precise motions, maintaining homogeneity. Patrick's slower gestures added gentle auditory textures, faint clinks, nudges, soft splashes. The laboratory's pulse remained continuous, layered, and immersive, blending motion, sound, and light seamlessly. Some of the most intricate effects unfolded naturally during this phase. Tiny bubbles floated in overlapping spirals, colors shifted subtly across gradients, and faint vapor trails reflected the soft glow. Sandy observed closely, noting transformations in her diagrams while making only minor adjustments. SpongeBob's stirring maintained the delicate rhythm, while Patrick's gentle taps and nudges enriched the layered soundscape. The environment remained dense, immersive, and continuous, providing a perfect balance of visual and auditory calm. As the night progressed toward the final hours, Sandy moved methodically among her stations, ensuring all mixtures stabilized. SpongeBob mirrored her every motion, stirring slowly and carefully. Patrick's movements became slower and more deliberate, producing soft, subtle sounds that layered naturally into the ambient texture. Tiny bubbles continued to rise in graceful spirals, faint vapors curled above the mixtures, and luminescent colors shimmered softly in the gentle gradients. The laboratory pulse had shifted to a deep, continuous hum, dense yet soothing. The final moments of observation emphasized complete stillness in the mixtures while retaining subtle visual interest. Sandy rotated, vessels minimally, tilting slightly to catch the softest reflections. SpongeBob stirred almost imperceptibly, maintaining gentle motion. Patrick leaned in with barely noticeable gestures, nudging bubbles softly or tapping lightly, adding delicate auditory textures. The laboratory remained fully immersive, continuous, and calming, a living ecosystem of light, motion, and sound, winding down toward peaceful equilibrium. The luminescent glow softened gradually, shifting from bright gradients to gentle, muted tones. Tiny bubbles floated more slowly, rising lazily and merging at the surface with barely perceptible movement. Faint vapors traced arcs above the liquids, reflecting the soft ambient light and adding visual depth. Sandy observed the transformations carefully, ensuring that every mixture reached final stabilization. SpongeBob's stirring had slowed to a gentle rhythm, complementing Patrick's soft, exploratory gestures. The combined visual and auditory environment was dense, layered, and fully immersive, exuding a sense of calm and tranquility. Sandy then performed final adjustments to the laboratory's overall environment. Equipment was set to low power, producing a soft, continuous hum. Burners were reduced to their minimal output, allowing the mixtures to cool fully. SpongeBob mirrored these motions with careful stirring to maintain stability. Patrick contributed subtle auditory layers through his slow, delicate movements. Tiny, luminescent bubbles, faint vapors, and soft hisses combined to form a harmonious, immersive experience, the culmination of hours of experimentation. As the night reached its end, Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick observed the final state of the laboratory. Tiny bubbles floated in gentle spirals, colors glimmered softly, vapors curled slowly above mixtures, and soft hisses and clinks persisted as the last layers of sound. SpongeBob stirred with minimal motion. Patrick leaned in with gentle, exploratory gestures, and Sandy oversaw the balance of light, motion, and sound. The laboratory was a dense, immersive, continuous environment, fully calm, perfect for relaxation, focus, or sleep. The final moments of Chapter 15 and the nighttime experiments drew a perfect resolution. Sandy's meticulous adjustments, SpongeBob's synchronized stirring, and Patrick's gentle gestures combined seamlessly with tiny luminescent bubbles, curling vapor, soft hisses, and delicate clinks. The atmosphere was rich, immersive, and perfectly balanced, blending control with subtle unpredictability. The laboratory pulse slowed to a deep, calming rhythm, the dense sensory layers gradually fading into tranquility. As dawn approached in the distant ocean, the laboratory remained in serene equilibrium. Sandy's meticulous planning, SpongeBob's careful stirring, and Patrick's gentle, exploratory presence had created a fully immersive environment where light, sound, and motion blended seamlessly. The night's experiments had reached their harmonious conclusion. The tree dome was quiet, the mixtures stabilized, the luminescent glow soft, the sounds of hisses, clinks, and swirls minimal, leaving a dense, immersive calm that lingered long after activity ceased. The night's resolution marked the perfect end to the experiments. Every detail, tiny bubbles, soft vapor trails, faint gradients of color, gentle hisses, clinks, and swirling currents combined into a continuous, layered, immersive environment. Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick had created a laboratory alive with sensory depth, yet wholly calm, a space for prolonged relaxation, focus, and restful immersion.